Chapter 797. Ao Nyo continued onward, and the red floating continent drew closer and closer, and Lin could clearly see that all of the buildings were oval-shaped crimson buildings that were supported by a single pillar. They looked a lot like oval-shaped mushrooms. At the very center of the buildings was a huge mushroom that glowed with a dazzling red light. The light and the floating continent were one and the same, and from a distance it looked like a red star. Huh. And Lin, look over there. There are other life forms. Su Xiaolan pointed at a spot below the red floating continent, where there were 5 black figures, and Lin sensed for a moment and discovered that the 5 black figures all had decent auras. In his eyes, those with decent auras were naturally more badass than Ao Nyo. As it turned out, they weren't the only ones interested in the red planet. There were also other powerful beings among the beast tribe that had chosen to explore this place. The 5 black dots in the extremely far distance seemed to have also spotted Lin and the others, and they ran toward them at a speed even faster than Ao Nyo's. And Lin was able to see them more clearly this time. The 5 black figures were a frog enshrouded in poisonous mist, a black lizard dragon, a wriggling monster that resembled a white glutinous rice ball, a lion with golden flames, and a huge dog with blue spikes all over its body. None of them can be ridden, Su Xiaolan grumbled. Ao Nyo's heart constricted again upon hearing Su Xiaolan's words. Moments later, it also saw who it was, and its expression shifted drastically as it turned tail and fled. And Lin and Su Xiaolan were both dumbstruck. Why are you running? And Lin was displeased. That's the Divine Guardian Squad under the Divine Bat Emperor's command. All of the beasts in that squad are terrifying beings of the soul formation stage. If you're caught by them in the ruins, nothing good will happen to you. Ao Nyo panicked as it ran, and Lin grabbed onto Ao Nyo's horns with both hands and yanked it back, almost causing it to flip over. Moo! Ao Nyo let loose a loud cry as it stopped running. They're the most terrifying beings in the soul formation stage. Are you scarier than me? And Lin asked. Ao Nyo. Ao Nyo trembled uncontrollably at the sight of the 5 beasts charging toward it. It could even see the sinister smiles on the faces of the 5 beasts. Soon, the Divine Bat Emperor's Divine Guardian Squad reached Lin and the others. Woof woof. You're smart enough not to run. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to withstand the wrath of the Emperor. The huge dog with blue spikes all over its body spoke in an extremely shrill voice. Croak, cooperate with us, and we'll spare your lives after we're done, the frog said proudly. Oh, 2 of them were actually humans. I thought they were minotaurs or horsemen, the golden flame long-necked lion said coldly as it narrowed its eyes at Lin and Su Xiaolan. Haha, human is here? Very good. We can eat them after we're done with the experiment. It's been a long time since I've tasted the flesh of a soul formation stage powerful being. The black rock lizard dragon flapped its wings with glee, but it didn't dare to use too much force in fear of flying into the air. At this moment, the white rice ball-like monster made its way to the front of the group. Stop wasting time. They're just 2 soul formation intermediate stage trash. You can do whatever you want with them. Hurry up and carry out your mission. The other 4 beasts stopped their bickering upon hearing this. The poison mist frog and the black rock lizard dragon stepped forward. It was clear that only 2 beasts had decided to attack. In their eyes, 2 beasts were more than enough to deal with 2 soul formation intermediate stage humans and 1 Ao Nyo at the soul formation pinnacle stage. The frog opened its mouth. Croak, be careful of that cow. The black rock lizard dragon chuckled. Hee hee, they look like they've been scared witless. They didn't even run away after seeing us. Croak, I'll come and help you after I capture those 2 humans, the frog said. What kind of experiment are you talking about? And Lin couldn't help but ask. Weaklings don't have the right to ask questions. You'll be my food sooner or later anyway. Croak! The frog croaked before leaping toward Lin and Su Xiaolan. The black rock lizard dragon also pounced toward Ao Nyo. The auras of the two beasts instantly rose to their peak, and their terrifying auras transformed into gale-force winds that swept through the surroundings. Their auras were indeed the most powerful among all the soul formation stage beasts that Lin had ever seen. The poison mist frog was as fast as a ghost. It opened its cavernous mouth, and its tongue shot forth like a bolt of black lightning, instantly wrapping around Lin's body. And Lin's eyes had already turned snowy white. Wings of wind spread open on his back, and streams of wind revolved around his evil-slaying sword. Divine Inspection Technique, Stage 2 Wind Spirit Technique, Wind Sword. 3 spell techniques were unleashed at the same time. The poison mist frog's tongue lashed toward Lin at an extremely fast speed, only to discover that Lin's body had instantly disappeared, leaving behind only a gust of wind. Croak? The frog croaked in confusion before feeling that its tongue was a little cold. Splat! Blood splattered through the air as the frog wailed in anguish. Its long tongue had been severed. Not only that, but the poisonous mist enshrouding its body was also shattered by the golden light. A massive golden fist, imbued with the power of the earth, crashed down with the force of a huge mountain before crashing into the frog's body. Boom! The frog was smashed into the ground by the fist, and its internal organs were pulverized. Even the ground within a radius of over a kilometer had caved in. At the same time, the black rock lizard dragon, which was flying toward Ao Nyo, saw 2 streaks of blue lightning sword projections flashing through the air. Immediately afterward, its massive dragon wings were severed. The lizard dragon transformed back into a lizard, and it stared at the oncoming woman in a jade dress with shock and horror on its face. In the next instant, the dragon's sparrow sword, which was flashing with flames and lightning, was already hovering above its head. Gasp! All of the beasts present stared at the scenes unfolding before them with dumbstruck expressions. Even though Ao Nyo had mentally prepared himself, his eyes were still wide open. Even though it knew that Lin and Su Xiaolan were very powerful, it was still extremely astonished to see 2 divine guardian squad beasts insta-killed. Is this the power of a soul formation intermediate stage human? The golden flame, long-necked lion was completely dumbstruck. Such terrifying power, even the gluten lord. The huge dog turned to look at the white, glutinous, rice-like beast beside it with shock in its eyes. The white, glutinous, rice-like monster didn't say anything. Instead, it stared intently at the man standing nearby with its yellow eyes. And Lin stepped onto the dying frog's body with a faint smile on his face. You're right, weaklings don't have the right to ask questions. So, can I ask a question now? F***CKU. If you want to kill me, then do it. If I say one more word, I'm your grandson. Ribbit. The frog roared with rage. You've got guts. And Lin raised his evil-slaying sword. Grandpa. The frog yelled. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, all of the beasts. Chapter 798. Everyone was caught off guard by the frog's words. Divine poison frog, you. The white rice ball monster's body trembled violently. It was clearly extremely enraged and couldn't help but speak. The frog yelled in a loud voice, I'm just a frog on a journey. I have a mother waiting for me to come home. I can't be an unfilial frog, ribbit. And Lin, it had to be said, this was quite a good explanation. Hearing this, the other 4 divine guardian squad members were enraged, and they roared in anger. You're a disgrace to the divine guardian squad. F***CK. Why is there a frog like you in the divine guardian squad? You're a disgrace to all of us. We can't let this frog live. Kill it. There's no use keeping this frog alive. The huge dog with blue spikes all over its body bared its sharp fangs as it roared with killing intent. Grandpa, save me. Ribbit, the poison mist frog, pleaded for help. And Lynn, all the beasts, did such a shameless frog really come from the beast race that would never be slaves? Roar, divine poison frog, I'm going to kill you. The lizard dragon that Su Xiaolan was pointing at suddenly roared as a powerful shockwave tore through the air. It completely unleashed its domain as black energy exploded outward like a ball of light. The lizard dragon had unleashed its power, but Su Xiaolan's dragon sparrow sword was even faster. Her dragon sparrow sword roared into the heavens as white holy flames protected her body from the energy explosion. At the same time, her true dragon lightning sword projection extended for several hundred meters before instantly puncturing the lizard dragon's head. Boom! The lizard dragon collapsed to the ground. Just like that, powerful divine guards died in less than a second after they rose to power. Su Xiaolan picked up one of her storage rings before turning toward the other 3 divine guardian squad members with a scorching light in her eyes. The huge dog that had just been itching to attack became even more enraged upon seeing this, and it pounced toward Lin. I'm going to drag you all to hell even if I die. Calm down, don't forget our mission. At this moment, the wriggling monster that looked like a glutinous rice ball stretched out its white tentacles and restrained the giant dog that was pouncing forward. However, a streak of golden light suddenly rushed towards Lin. The golden flame, long-necked lion couldn't hold it in any longer. Golden flames erupted from its body, covering a radius of several hundred meters. Golden lightning balls containing terrifying power appeared within the golden flames and crashed toward Lin. This was its ultimate technique, the Fuyang Thunder Lion Cannon. Each ball of golden lightning was powerful enough to blast a soul formation stage, soul beast to death. The combined might of so many lightning balls was no less fearsome than an attack unleashed by a rookie return to void stage mighty figure. Roar! Traitors and trashy humans, go to hell! The golden flame, long-necked lion's body was spinning rapidly as it roared and pounced toward Lin. It was obvious that it had come to the realization that it was going to sacrifice itself in order to kill 1,000 enemies. It's too noisy, and Lin waved his hand. The balls of golden lightning abruptly faltered before changing directions and hurtling toward the golden flame, long-necked lion. The golden flame, long-necked lion's face was filled with shock and horror. It was completely unable to comprehend what had just happened. Boom, boom, boom. The balls of golden lightning struck the golden flame, long-necked lion at the same time before exploding. Terrifying energy instantly swept forth for several kilometers as boundless destructive lightning destroyed everything in its path. It was as if a golden sun had lit up the night sky, painting the entire space golden. The beast and Lin and the others were all blasted flying by the shock waves from the explosion. After the lightning dissipated, the golden flame, long-necked lion's entire body was charred black and it had lost all signs of life. Its mouth was wide open as it collapsed to the ground, where the aroma of charred meat wafted through the air. W8. What the hell happened? Ao Nio stared at the scenes unfolding before its eyes with a dumbstruck expression. The divine poison frog, which was being stepped on by Lin, stared blankly at the sight of the cooked golden flame, long-necked lion. Croak, croak. And Lin, gluten lord, did that human do that? The huge dog was also scared ***. So be it if the golden flame, long-necked lion had been insta-killed, but the fact that it had been insta-killed by its own spell technique sent chills running down its spine. The gluten lord's expression became extremely grave. These 2 humans are far more powerful than we imagined. Don't be fooled by their cultivation bases. Let's retreat for now. However, just as the 2 divine guardian squad members were about to turn and flee, a woman in a jade dress appeared behind them to seal off their path of retreat. Don't even think about leaving before you tell us what we want to know. Su Xiaolan smiled. She stood proudly with her dragon sparrow sword in her hand, and her sword intent surged into the heavens as she stood in the path of the two soul beasts at the soul formation pinnacle stage on her own. F***CK, I've been underestimated. I'm going to kill her. The huge dog with blue spikes all over its body immediately charged toward Su Xiaolin. The gluten lord didn't stop the huge dog this time. Instead, it pounced toward Su Xiaolin with it. They had no way out, so they could only choose to break through the defensive line. If they could defeat or capture this human woman, they might be able to turn the tables on this battle. Dead spirit killing spike. The blue spikes on the huge dog's body abruptly detached themselves from its body before flying toward Su Xiaolin, like flying swords exuding frosty blue light. The space in the wake of the spikes froze, and the screeching of the spikes sounded like the wails of countless ghosts. Lightning crackled beneath Su Xiaolin's feet, and she quickly evaded the onslaught of blue spikes as she inched closer to the huge dog. So fast! The huge dog's heart jolted with shock. However, it was a soul formation stage powerful being that had been through countless battles, and it was not afraid of Su Xiaolin, who had evaded all of its attacks. The huge dog's claws transformed into the sharpest of blades as it slashed toward the oncoming woman. This was its full-force attack, and it could shatter even a low-rank spirit tool with a single claw strike. Its attack was extremely fast and ferocious, and even with Su Xiaolin's movement techniques, she was unable to evade at such a close range. However, it was also at this moment that golden symbols began to flash over Su Xiaolin's palms. The defensive dragon symbol inheritance that she had obtained from the immortal spirit tower was completely unleashed. The phantom of a golden dragon had suddenly appeared and protected her body. The claws that were powerful enough to shatter spirit tools fell upon the golden dragon head, upon which an extremely sharp screech erupted. The huge dog stared at its claws with incredulity on its face. My full-force attack was blocked by a soul formation intermediate stage human cultivator. At this moment, Su Xiaolin's dragon sparrow sword had already fallen upon it. The giant dog's body was sliced in half, and the explosion of lightning and holy flames engulfed its body. It became the second beast to be roasted, and it couldn't be more dead. However, in the instant that Su Xiaolin unleashed her power against the huge dog, over 100 white tentacles quickly flew toward her, creating an inescapable net. Chapter 799. The Gluten Lord was a soul beast that was adept at grasping opportunities in battle. It knew when to strike, and that would give it the highest chance of success. The moment Su Xiaolin's defensive spell technique had just disappeared, and she was slicing the huge dog in half with all her might, was when the Gluten Lord unleashed its full power. Over 100 white tentacles erupted from its body before pouncing toward Su Xiaolin like snakes and dragons, determined to ensnare her. It was also at this moment that heaven and earth suddenly became completely inky black. Within this absolute darkness, the Gluten Lord could sense the threat of death. Splat! A tearing sound erupted as light returned to heaven and earth, and the galaxy of stars reappeared. However, the Gluten Lord's white body had already been sliced in half, and Lin appeared behind the Gluten Lord with rage burning in his eyes. How dare you use your tentacles on Xiaolin? Do you know what the word death is? The Gluten Lord's body was sliced in half by the evil-slaying sword. However, before he had a chance to come to his senses, the Gluten Lord's body fused back together, and over 100 tentacles pounced toward Su Xiaolin again. However, Su Xiaolin had already caught her breath this time, and holy flames erupted from her body to incinerate all of the white tentacles. Holy F***CK, you're still coming. And Lin flared up with rage upon seeing this, and boundless sword projections erupted from his evil-slaying sword. 6 strikes of the war god, 100 sword technique. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A series of dazzling sword projections hurtled toward the Gluten Lord. The Gluten Lord had no time to evade, and its massive body was instantly riddled with holes by the flying swords. The final sword strike sliced its body in half again, and Lin glared at the gluten lord with a cold expression. Anyone that dared to touch Su Xiaolan had to be sliced into 1,000,000 pieces. However, to his surprise, the gluten lord's body began to squirm again, and it reverted back to its original form. Hee, foolish human. I have an immortal body, so no matter what you do, you're just wasting your energy. The gluten lord twisted its round body around as it looked at Enlin with a disdainful expression. Although Enlin was a little surprised, he wasn't shocked. After all, he had already seen freaks like the 1,000-eyed demonic dragon, who was able to grow stronger the more he hacked at it, and its power didn't diminish in the slightest. This gluttonous overlord really wasn't anything to be surprised about. A soul formation stage soul beast dares to call itself immortal? He smiled lightly and continued, To tell you the truth, I and Ritian don't mind a life form like yours. Moreover, I have 100 ways to turn you into ashes. Arrogant, the gluten lord's body abruptly exploded, and a series of white objects tore through the air like bullets before hurtling toward Enlin. At the same time, it kept chanting, and a huge white palm condensed in the void, pressing down on Enlin. Boundless cold air was released, as if it could freeze the void. I'm not even afraid of a real spatial shackle. You should forget about this little trick. And Lin chuckled, and the space around him twisted. The void flame began to appear. Boom, boom, boom. One white particle after another pounced toward Enlin, but it began to twist and melt not far away from Enlin. What is this? The gluten lord's pupils contracted. Boom! The white palm crashed down, and the ground within a radius of over 1 kilometer caved in. However, Enlin had already spread open his wings of wind, and he had already reached the gluten lord. The image of a golden eye appeared on his forehead, and energy fluctuations instantly proliferated outward. In that instant, the gluten lord felt as if it had lost something. Splat! Another sword strike fell, and for the first time the gluten lord's massive body was struck by the excruciating pain of being torn apart. What's going on? The gluten lord could see a massive gash being sliced into its round body, from which white liquid gushed forth, and its life force was quickly fading away. If this continued, it was going to die. Ah, what did you do to me? The gluten lord's body wriggled, and a long saber materialized on its white body before slashing toward Lin's waist. And Lin was caught completely off guard, and his body was sliced in half. The gluten lord was ecstatic. Ha 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 ha. Ha! Its laughter abruptly cut off, and its eyes widened as if it had seen a ghost. And Lin's upper and lower body began to wriggle before slowly fusing back together again. So this is the power of body fusion and division? Even the structure of my body has been completely changed. I can't even feel pain anymore. And Lin clicked his tongue in wonder. This was a new and novel experience, and his eyes lit up. The gluten lord came to its senses, and a terrifying thought occurred to it as it stared at Enlin with shock and horror on its face. Could it be? Could it be? You're right, it's exactly what you're thinking. And Lin chuckled as his sword projection crashed down upon the gluten lord like flowing water. Splat! White liquid splattered through the air again, and the gluten lord howled in pain. Pain! How long had it been since it had experienced pain? Ever since it could divide its body like glutinous rice, this feeling had never appeared again. But now it discovered that it no longer had the ability to divide its body. The gluten lord howled in pain, and its body abruptly elongated before slashing toward Lin's neck like a flying sword, leaving a dazzling sword projection in its wake. And Lin didn't dodge, and he allowed the attack to descend upon him. He also took advantage of this opportunity to swing his sword toward the gluten lord's body. The gluten lord howled in agony as it hurtled back in retreat. A massive gash had been inflicted on its body, and blood splattered through the air as its life force rapidly drained away. Meanwhile, and Lin gripped his sword in one hand and his own head in the other before reattaching it. Despair! The Gluten Lord was disgusted by its own ability. Could this be the cycle of the heavenly Tao retribution? Su Xiaolan let loose a cry of shock upon seeing this. And Lin, don't do that. It's too scary. And Lin nodded. I'll end the battle right away. I don't feel any pain after being slashed. This ability doesn't feel good at all. The Gluten Lord almost jumped up in fright upon hearing this. You're so King shameless. You're taking advantage of me. Yet you're still trying to act innocent. You don't feel any pain after being slashed? Do you want to feel the pain of being slashed to feel good? Are you sick in the head? Even though the Gluten Lord was roasting Lin with all its might, its massive, round body still sprawled to the ground. Please spare me, boss. And Lin. Su Xiaolan, a certain severely wounded frog on the ground. And Lin suddenly had a feeling that the calmer a beast was, the more cowardly it was. He had thought that the Gluten Lord would rather die than submit like the other beasts. As long as you agree to let me go, I'll answer anything you ask. The Gluten Lord begged in a loud voice. It had already figured out that the only thing more terrifying than death was not completing its mission. Hence, it was willing to give up many things in order to complete its mission. This was something that it had already figured out after not being able to defeat Lin. Instead, it had been stripped of its most powerful ability. In any case, even if it told Lin everything it knew, it wouldn't have much of an impact on the mission. In the end, whether it could complete the mission or not would still depend on its power and luck. If it didn't die, then it would still have a chance to obtain the Blood Jade Kirin. If it died, then it would really have nothing left. All right, then tell me everything you know. By the way, you have to swear a Tao Heart vow to reveal all of the valuable information, and Lin said with a smile. All right, you also have to swear a Tao Heart vow to release me after you obtain the information. Otherwise, I won't tell you anything, the Gluten Lord said. And Lin felt like this was no problem, so he agreed. Thus, the Gluten Lord and Lin both swore vows. The Gluten Lord heaved a faint sigh of relief before telling Lin everything it knew. Chapter 800. The Gluten Lord. Otherwise, if Lin were to kill it in a fit of rage, how was it going to get home? That restriction has a special characteristic. It takes 2 seconds to activate its power after entering the restricted space. We can try to step onto the red continent within those 2 seconds and see if we can dispel the restriction, the Gluten Lord suggested. You swore an oath that you would suffer Tao Heart backlash if you tried to kill me. The Gluten Lord was unyielding. The Gluten Lord threw up a mouthful of blood. It was a good thing that there were other beasts helping it with its research. Su Xiaolan drew her dragon sparrow sword, and wind, lightning, and flames erupted between heaven and earth. The Gluten Lord. It spoke with lingering fear in its heart. At that time, my entire body was reduced to a puddle of mud on the ground. My body structure was severely damaged, and my consciousness was also severely wounded. That star wasn't just a physical attack. It was an energy attack that was flawless in all directions. If it weren't for the fact that I had an immortal pill, I most likely wouldn't have survived. Su Xiaolan took 2 of the 5 Divine Guardian Squad storage rings, while Lin took 3. Aren't you just a puddle of mud now? And Lin looked at the Gluten Lord's limp, squishy body with a puzzled expression. He had always wanted to research how the stars could suppress flying life forms. The Gluten Lord was extremely touched and expressed its gratitude. That's right. That restriction doesn't have any spell formation markings on it, and it seems to have been formed by the power of heaven and earth, which is very similar to the star suppression. The Gluten Lord didn't deny this. A thought occurred to Lin, and he was a little perplexed. Your power is very useful, and it's very difficult for you to die. You should be able to resist the star suppression, right? Why are you using other beasts as test subjects? And Lin made his way over to the traveling frog. Is the Gluten Lord correct? Do you have anything to add? There are a total of 12 divine Guardian Squad members who have entered the vast land of blood. All of them have come under the direct orders of the divine Bet Emperor to search for the Kirin Blood Jade. Aside from some spirit stones and spirit rank treasures, there was only a 9th grade immortal fruit. That immortal fruit just so happened to be able to increase the purity of one's flame power. And Lin, I can feel your sincerity. So, the problem we have to solve now isn't the suppression of the stars, but the restriction on the floating land. And Lin looked up at the floating land in the sky. Boss, spare my life. I'm telling the truth. The members of the Divine Guardian Squad have only just arrived here, so we really don't know much about the Blood Jade Kirin. The Gluten Lord's body trembled violently. That's right. In order to reach the Scarlet Continent above, we even did a few experiments and obtained some preliminary results. Therefore, it was eaten by Enlin and Su Xiaolan on the spot. After eating the immortal fruit, it was time to get down to business. The Gluten Lord glanced at Enlin and the others as he spoke. The floating continent in the sky is most likely where the Kirin Blood Jade is located. Perhaps all the beasts that had come here were dead. That's why the beast men who left this world didn't have any information about this. Gluten Lord. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. Seeing as you've answered quite well, I'll return your power to you. He had initially planned to use Ao Nyo as a guinea pig to study the rules of the suppression of the stars. However, Enlin had developed an attachment to Ao Nyo, and he couldn't bear to let it take any more risks. Whoosh! Enlin silently unsheathed his long sword. If you don't give me your storage ring, I'll kill you, Enlin threatened. There was no helping it. The Gluten Lord had already stolen all of its lines of surrender, so if it wanted to live, it had to reveal some valuable information. What kind of F***king information was this? It was all bullsh**T. The Gluten Lord's mouth wriggled as it spoke in a slow voice. We all know that the most important part of getting to the Crimson Continent above is how to avoid the suppression of the stars. The suppression of the stars is one of the 3 strangest things about the vast land of blood, but it actually has a loophole. Xiaolan, kill it, Enlin instructed. Ah, my power is back. The Gluten Lord was extremely excited. None of the beasts that came out of the vast land of blood have gone to the Crimson Planet. However, all of the information we gathered and all of the mystic realms were able to deduce that the Kirin Blood Jade most likely exists in that direction, so we came here. Then why didn't you use this method to get to the Crimson Floating Continent? And Lin asked. The Gluten Lord was dumbstruck. The Gluten Lord's heart was bleeding. That was an immortal fruit. Was it really okay for them to eat it so casually? And Lin's interest was piqued upon hearing this, and Lin nodded. Right at this moment, a ripple proliferated forth. The Gluten Lord blinked. That's all I know. The Gluten Lord glared at the divine poison frog with a furious expression. It wanted nothing more than to strangle that **T to death. What results? And Lin asked, and Lin's eyes lit up. You're saying that the effect of this restriction is similar to the suppression of the stars? It disappears as soon as it comes into contact with the land? The Gluten Lord replied with a grave expression. That's because there's a spherical restriction with a radius of 1 kilometer around the Crimson Floating Continent. If a normal living being approaches it, their body will be torn to shreds by a burst of mighty power. And Lin was getting impatient. I and Lin am robbing you. The divine poison frog looked up at the sky and ignored the Gluten Lord. What do you think? He turned to the Gluten Lord. Give me your storage ring. And Lin extended a hand. As expected, useless things like this should just die. The Gluten Lord almost threw up a mouthful of blood. It's not the same. And Lin nodded. Very good. Then I'll leave this glorious yet arduous mission to you, Brother Gluten Lord. And Lin's lips twitched. These brave warriors were probably forced into a corner by them. That's right, and Lin didn't want to kill it, but that didn't mean others couldn't. Its life was still in the hands of Lin and the others, and Lin's eyes lit up. Do you have any more immortal pills? Holy F asterisk CK. It felt like it had been tricked. It carefully rummaged through the storage ring, but didn't find any valuable information. The gluten lord felt as if something had been added to its body. This was a feeling of fullness, as if all of its cells had been revived. The ghastly wounds on its body began to quickly heal, and Lin nodded. Continue. What a despairing thing this was. An awkward expression appeared on the gluten lord's face. To tell you the truth, I tried to do this myself once, and I was suppressed by the stars. My entire body was reduced to a pile of mush. That's all. The gluten lord shook its head. As long as there's a physical connection between a living being and the earth, it won't be suppressed by the stars. For example, this. The gluten lord's body shuddered violently, and the ground tremored violently before slowly bulging upward, elevating its body by 10 meters. By changing the terrain, you won't be suppressed by the stars. And Lin obtained the gluten lord's storage ring. However, after sacrificing so many pioneers, we've also reaped some rewards. For example, the suppression of the stars will only take place after 3 meters in the air for 6 seconds. In order to study this strange phenomenon, we've already sacrificed 18 brave warriors, Sai. The gluten lord pointed at the remains in the distance with a forlorn expression. Chapter 801. Brother Gluten Lord? Who the F asterisk CK is your brother? Would you let me take this risk if I were your brother? Never would the gluten lord have thought that it would become the first test subject after Lin asked for its opinion. If it had known this would happen, it wouldn't have said anything at all. It looked at Lin with a dark expression, clearly unwilling to do this. And Lin immediately offered words of consolation. Brother Gluten Lord, didn't you tell me that you have an immortal body when we were battling? Hence, it's safest for you to do this, right? The gluten lord convulsed with rage upon hearing this. Right my A asterisk S. You superficial brother. Moo. I think you're right. Eonyo suddenly chimed in. I also think you're right, Ribbit. The divine poison frog chimed in. The gluten lord immediately roared with rage. Shut up. None of your business. The divine poison frog thought to itself, of course, it's my business. If you're not going, then I'm going. After that, Su Xiaolan also chimed in. After a simple and democratic discussion, everyone unanimously decided to let the gluten lord try this method. You can't go against the will of the people, brother gluten lord. And Lin patted the gluten lord's round body to find that it was quite soft and a little sticky. The gluten lord was tempted to use its super clone mystic technique to escape. However, it immediately abandoned that bold idea at the sight of Lin's sharp eyes and Su Xiaolan's dragon sparrow sword. After all, theoretically speaking, the feasibility of its conjecture was still very high. Let's try it. The gluten lord decided to go for broke. If it could reach the floating continent in the sky safely, then it would be able to beat Lin and the others to the Kirin Blood Jade, thereby increasing its chances of obtaining the Kirin Blood Jade. Thus, a massive rock pillar rose up from the ground and carried Lin and the others toward the edge of the floating continent. All right, stop here, the gluten lord suddenly said. They had already calculated the distance. This distance was about the limit of the red floating continent that could destroy the invading life forms. And Lin's eyes turned snowy white as he looked up at the floating continent up ahead, but he couldn't see any formation or restriction. Looks like it really has become one with heaven and earth. It feels a little like the power of rules, and there's no way to break it. He sighed softly, looking a little regretful. This was the first time his divine inspection technique had been unable to break through a restriction. This continent was actually not that big. It was only a few thousand meters in length, which was equivalent to the size of an ordinary city. They were all mushroom-shaped buildings, and the largest mushroom building in the center was emitting an extremely dazzling red glow, illuminating the entire continent like a star. "Go on, brother gluten tyrant," and Lin said. The gluten lord's face twitched slightly. Even though it was slightly unwilling, it had no choice but to take the risk and give it a try. Perhaps it could make use of this opportunity to profit from a disaster and seize the initiative. It took a deep breath, and the white body at the bottom squirmed crazily. Its aura continued to rise. 2 seconds, 1 kilometer. This was not a difficult task for it. All it had to do was unleash its full power. I'm going. Just you wait, divine poison frog. The gluten lord glared at the frog. The frog cowered behind its grandpa. It wanted the gluten lord to succeed, but at the same time, it wanted the gluten lord to fail and perish. Bam! The gluten lord set off a sonic boom, and it instantly broke through the sound barrier as it transformed into a streak of white light and hurtled toward the red floating continent. It was extremely fast, and it landed on the red continent in just over a second. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, Ao Nio, and the divine poison frog all held their breaths as they stared at the figure that had landed on the red continent. Success or failure would be decided in the next second. A second later, the gluten lord wriggled its seductive body and chortled with glee. "Haha, I'm fine, I did it." It turned its eyes toward the center of the red continent as it spoke, and a scorching light appeared in its eyes. This was the best time to fight for the Kirin Blood Jade, and it was closer to the Kirin Blood Jade than to Enlin and the others. Bam! The gluten lord charged toward the mushroom at the center of the continent, and Lin and Su Xiaolan's expressions shifted upon seeing this. But before they had a chance to do anything, an indescribable burst of power descended upon the gluten lord's body. The red light enshrouding the entire continent suddenly transformed into a series of thin beams of extremely high energy density, which formed a dense net of energy that flashed past the gluten lord's body. The restriction was triggered in the end, and not in 2 seconds, but in 3 seconds. The terrifying energy fluctuations made Enlin and Su Xiaolan's hearts palpitate with fear. "Ah!" The gluten lord let loose a heart-wrenching cry of anguish. The red beams of energy were like the sharpest blades between heaven and earth, and they instantly pierced through the gluten lord's body, slicing it into over 1,000 pieces. This attack had clearly broken through the gluten lord's power of fusion and division, and it was an attack that struck directly at the source of the gluten lord's power. Hence, there was no such thing as an invincible enemy. If there was, then it was definitely because the enemy wasn't powerful enough. How terrifying! Ribbit! The divine poison frog's mouth gaped open in shock. This power was condensed from the red light on the continent. And Lin was also given a fright. That should be the case. From a harmless light, it instantly condensed into a light with extremely high energy density. I don't think I'll be able to withstand an attack of this caliber. Su Xiaolan's little face was also a little pale. Both of them were filled with lingering fear as they had almost followed in the gluten lord's footsteps. After being sliced into over 1,000 pieces, the gluten lord was unable to regenerate, and its life force was quickly draining away. However, this wasn't the end in the sky above. The 9 stars in the middle of the Milky Way suddenly flashed at the same time. Faint white power of stars suddenly descended from the sky, instantly piercing through space and crashing down upon the gluten lord's body with the boundless might of heaven and earth. Boom! Energy exploded forth, and the gluten lord's body was crushed in a frenzy. The gluten lord's blood-curdling cries erupted into the heavens, and Lin and Su Xiaolan both drew a sharp intake of breath. So moving around on the red continent was still considered a life form, and it would be suppressed by the stars. This was very important, and they had to make a note of it. The 2 of them turned toward the gluten lord again to find that it had already lost all signs of life. A soul beast at the soul formation pinnacle stage, who was known to be indestructible, had fallen just like that. Sigh. The gluten lord has made a noble sacrifice for us. Let us mourn for a minute. A grief-stricken expression appeared on Enlin's face. Su Xiaolan, Ao Niu, and the divine poison frog all mourned for the gluten lord. Su Xiaolan was the most compassionate of them all, and she really did mourn for the gluten lord. The divine poison frog wouldn't be able to last that long, and it looked around for an opportunity to go home. The path that the gluten lord suggested is no longer feasible. Not only can we not remove the restriction, but even the suppression of the stars is also a big problem. Do you guys have any good ideas? And Lin asked. Su Xiaolan's brows furrowed in thought. The suppression of the stars is easy to remove. We can just use the Earth Mastery technique to create a path that leads to the surface. The problem is still the restriction. Moo, I have a rather cowardly idea, Ao Niu suddenly said. Oh, what is it? And Lin turned to Ao Niu. Let's go out. It's too dangerous here, Ao Niu said with a serious expression. I agree. Going home is the safest, ribbit, the traveling frog chimed in. And Lin. Chapter 802. And Lin had a very mature suggestion in response to Ao Niu's cowardly thoughts. No, I refuse. If we don't have dreams, then we're no different from salted fish. We've already obtained so much information, and we're the closest to the Kirin blood jade. How can we give up here? He spoke with a serious expression. But I'm not a human, Moo. Ao Niu retorted with a serious expression. I'm just a frog, ribbit. The divine poison frog also spoke with a serious expression. And I'm a frog with no dreams. I just want to go home, ribbit. The divine poison frog added, as if it was afraid that Enlin wouldn't agree. And Lin stared speechlessly at these two cowardly beasts. That's right, if these two weren't cowards, they would have attacked Enlin a long time ago. Spirit nurturing stage spirit beasts didn't care about life and death, and they were willing to fight soul formation stage soul beasts to the death. These two beasts were clearly the most cowardly bunch, and Lin didn't expect them to do anything, and he couldn't think of any good ideas either. Most importantly, he didn't know what to do with that restriction. Could they resist it? Su Xiaolan couldn't, but he had thick skin, so perhaps he could. Furthermore, with his two trump cards, perhaps they could, however. There would be some risks involved. If they failed, then they would suffer the same fate as the gluten lord. He shuddered at the thought of being sliced into thousands of pieces before being crushed by the stars. So be it, let's go down and think about it, and Lin said with a resigned expression. Thus, everyone returned to the surface and looked up at the red continent in the sky. Su Xiaolan ran her fingers through her hair. Let's say all the beasts that came here died. In that case, what kind of danger could cause them to be completely annihilated? From our current situation, all of the dangers are triggered by the environment, so why didn't these two beasts survive? It's not like they all died, right? Ao Niu and the divine poison frog felt like they had been mocked again, but that didn't matter. They didn't care as long as they could get out of here. Su Xiaolan's words actually indicated that there should be other dangers here. It couldn't be the kind of danger that could be triggered passively from the mainland, but the kind that could really wipe out a team. And Lin and the others were still in a dilemma. Should they fight or not? The Kirin blood jade that even the divine Bad Emperor was drooling over, the Kirin blood jade that the Celestial Darch was willing to purchase for 50 million spirit stones. It was right before their eyes. How could he give up on such a good opportunity so easily? Of course not. Therefore, they continued to think of ways to break out of this situation. It wasn't that Enlin and Su Xiaolan hadn't considered the opinions of the two beasts, but with such a great opportunity right in front of them, they really didn't want to miss it. Just when he was at his wit's end, the sound of running came from afar, and Lin and the others were alarmed. More beasts were approaching, and there were quite a few of them, and Lin stared at the beasts in the distance, which were still black dots. His powerful divine sense spread out for several dozen kilometers, enveloping the entire team. 6 soul formation stage soul beasts and 16 spirit nurturing stage spirit beasts. There's a soul beast's divine sense that can detect my divine sense, and it's even disrupting it? A surprised expression appeared on Enlin's face. His divine sense was even more powerful than that of the vast majority of return to void stage mighty figures. Actively using one's divine sense to probe others could easily be detected and countered. However, if there was a large disparity between the two parties, it would still be possible to conceal one's divine sense. For Enlin's divine sense to be detected and disrupted by a soul beast's divine sense, there was most likely a soul beast with an extremely powerful divine sense that was comparable to that of a new return to void stage mighty figure. The oncoming beast pack in the distance slowly slowed down, clearly wary of Enlin and the others as they didn't choose to charge toward them. Interesting. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face. This is the first time I've seen such cautious beasts. It looked like their enemies this time were not to be underestimated. Even though the beast horde had slowed down, they still drew their weapons and unleashed their domains. All of a sudden, their auras surged like a vast ocean, and they were clearly ready for battle. The divine poison frog's legs gave out from under him again upon seeing the beast at the front. It's here, and Lin was curious. Who is it? The captain of the Divine Bat Emperor's Divine Guardian Squad, the peerless saber demon. The divine poison frog replied in a trembling voice, and Lin nodded with an enlightened expression. That beast was most likely the soul beast that had detected his divine sense. As expected of the captain of the Divine Guardian Squad, it was indeed quite powerful. However, peculiar expressions appeared on Enlin and Su Xiaolan's faces upon seeing the peerless saber demon. This is probably the opposite of cute? Su Xiaolan asked in a crisp voice. You could say that it's very cute. And Lin did not refute this. The peerless saber demon, leading the pack of beast tribe powerful beings, was a groundhog that was half as tall as a grown man. The groundhog's body was covered in soft golden fur. Its golden eyes exuded a terrifying aura, and it held a pair of snowy white sabers that exuded extremely powerful energy fluctuations in its paws, giving it a fearsome and ferocious appearance. Even though it looked very ferocious, it appeared to be particularly adorable in the face of this horde of ferocious beasts. No, it was adorable to begin with. And Lin was slightly intimidated by the surging aura. But a strange emotion welled up in his heart upon seeing the peerless saber demon. He loved to eat groundhogs in the past. This groundhog was so big, would it be delicious? The peerless saber demon drew closer and closer to Enlin, and it finally caught sight of the human that was giving it some sort of pressure. What was most alarming to it was that it could see scorching desire and desire on the human's face, and there was even a crystalline liquid flowing from the corner of his lips. Was this just a hallucination? The peerless saber demon's golden eyes widened. It felt like the human wanted it. That's right. The human wanted to possess it or eat it. This was the instinct of a wild beast, but its instincts were always very accurate. Stop! The peerless saber demon suddenly yelled for the beast tribe to stop. What is it, team leader? A soul formation stage soul beast asked. Suddenly halting in the middle of a charge would weaken the beast tribe's morale. So all of the beasts were quite curious. The peerless saber demon's lips twitched involuntarily as it stared at the human male. Not only did the human male pull out a sword, but he also pulled out a frying pan. What the F***CK was going on? Was he afraid that no one would know what he was going to do next? That's a little strange. Don't act rashly, the peerless saber demon said with difficulty. The groundhog was very sure that the being that had unleashed its powerful divine sense was the human before it. It naturally wasn't going to judge based on cultivation base, as that terrifying divine sense had already told it the answer. The groundhog wasn't going to underestimate its opponent. It could even see the disappointment in the human's eyes upon seeing it stop its charge, When humans went berserk, they were even more terrifying than wild beasts. Chapter 803. Thus, the two forces faced off against each other for no apparent reason, and Lin was a little perplexed. Was he really that scary? Or could it be that the beast tribe had finally developed some intelligence? What he didn't expect was that his image of him holding a sword in one hand and a frying pan in the other was quite scary to a groundhog. Su Xiaolan rolled her eyes in exasperation at Lin's actions. Even though the groundhog in front of her looked quite plump, it was still a highly intelligent life form. Wouldn't it be cruel to eat it? In reality, humans eating beast meat and beasts eating human meat was a very common occurrence on the Taichu continent. This was actually a result of the survival of the fittest in the world's food chain. Everyone was at the top of the food chain. If they didn't want to be eaten, they had to be more powerful than their opponents. For example, if a return to void stage beast died, a normal cultivator's cultivation base would progress significantly after eating its flesh. Would they not eat it because it was a highly intelligent life form? What a joke! Beasties were so adorable and could talk, so they were not allowed to eat them. If they didn't eat them, countless cultivators would fight over them. As for beasties that weren't adorable, there was even less of a psychological burden for them to eat them. It was a wonder what kind of psychological state this was in. Another phenomenon was that cultivators found food that resembled humans to be more difficult to eat. In contrast, it was easier for them to eat food that was strangely shaped. At the end of the day, this was a result of a strange concept that humans had developed over a long period of time. However, not all cultivators were willing to accept such a phenomenon. Some cultivators found eating highly intelligent life forms very disgusting. There was also a group of cultivators who felt that not only were highly intelligent life forms inedible, but even normal animals were also inedible. Because they could feel pain, they could feel happiness, and they could also feel emotions. How cruel would it be to eat them? All living beings should be equal. Thus, the Buddhist kingdom of the West was born. Everyone should be vegetarian and not eat meat. Buddhism was merciful and nature was empty. Apparently, a certain faction had appeared in the Buddhist kingdom, and they felt that plants were inedible as well, because plants were also living beings. All living beings were equal, so what right did they have to deprive others of their right to live? However, humans couldn't just not eat anything, right? This faction could not starve to death. As a result, Buddhist cultivators who studied photosynthesis were born in this world. Just as Su Xiaolan was lost in her thoughts, the groundhog began to move. The peerless saber demon was enraged when it saw the traveling frog next to Enlin. Divine poison frog, why are you with humans? Are you going to betray the divine Bat Emperor? The frog shuddered. What should I do? Both sides are so strong, I can't afford to offend them. It had no choice but to come up with a solution. It looked at the groundhog with an aggrieved expression and didn't say anything, but two streams of tears flowed from the corners of its eyes. They looked at each other with tears in their eyes, speechless. Yes, I have my difficulties, but I can't say it out loud. Sure enough, the groundhog immediately thought of many possibilities upon seeing the frog's current state. It was no longer targeting the frog. Instead, it looked at Enlin angrily. Scum? Aha! And Lin was dumbfounded. Why did she suddenly start scolding him? Couldn't she just fight properly? However, the groundhog's roar was quite terrifying, and the sound waves swept up gale-force winds that cracked the ground below. Ah! Kill those two humans! The peerless saber demon roared. Extremely powerful auras erupted from the 5 soul formation stage soul beasts and 16 spirit, nurturing stage spirit beasts, as they pounced toward Lin. And Lin was given a fright by this, and he slashed his evil-slaying sword through the air, unleashing a black sword projection that pierced through heaven and earth toward one of the beast tribe powerful beings. However, an extremely powerful white saber projection also appeared in that instant before clashing with the black sword projection, upon which boundless light erupted forth. In the end, Enlin's sword projection and saber projection were nullified at the same time. However, The peerless saber demon had 2 sabers, and its other saber projection arrived in the blink of an eye. The saber projection sliced through space with unstoppable force before descending upon Enlin at an extremely fast speed. The saber projection had already transcended beyond the realm of the soul formation stage and had reached an even higher level. Enlin's expression shifted slightly. This groundhog really was powerful. At the very least, it gave him the feeling that he was facing Dongua. This meant that this soul formation stage groundhog might be able to hold its own against the return to void stage Dongua. This groundhog was very powerful. Streams of wind revolved around Enlin's evil-slaying sword as he blocked the groundhog's second saber projection at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, all of the other beast tribe powerful beings had already converged upon them. Su Xiaolan's aura sword and the might of a paramount holy beast caused all of the beast tribe powerful beings' hearts to tremble. She slashed her dragon sparrow sword through the air, and the holy vermilion flame transformed into a scorching inferno that engulfed all of the beast tribe powerful beings. Most of the beast tribe powerful beings hurtled back in retreat, and a few of them were too slow to flee or pounce toward Su Xiaolan before being incinerated into ashes amid blood-curdling wails. A single sword strike had intimidated all of its powerful enemies. Only now did the peerless saber demon discover that the other human cultivator was also an extremely fearsome being. Perhaps they really wouldn't be able to defeat her. Retreat! The groundhog roared as it immediately issued a command. All of the beast tribe powerful beings immediately retreated upon hearing this. However, things were always going to change so abruptly. A pair of blue hands suddenly appeared above the galaxy of stars. They were flawless, intricate, and boundlessly vast. It was impossible to describe just how big those hands were. In any case, there was no way to avoid those blue hands. Even if they covered their eyes, they would still be able to see those blue hands within the darkness. It existed in the starry sky as if it were the entire world. However, it didn't exist in the starry sky as if it were an illusion. The fingers of those 2 hands were bent, one high and one low, and the palms were facing each other, as if there was something special between those 2 palms. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, and all of the beast tribe powerful beings' expressions shifted drastically upon seeing this. This was one of the 3 most peculiar phenomena of the vast land of blood, inversion. This was an area of effect attack. When that pair of indescribable hands appeared, the entire world would be flipped upside down, and all living beings would fall into the sea of stars. The divine Bat Emperor had sent over 100 beast tribe powerful beings into the vast land of blood to carry out a mission, but over 90% of them had perished in the sea of stars due to the inversion. All of a sudden, those 2 hands began to slowly flip over, as if they were trying to turn the strange object between those 2 palms around them. Boom! Heaven and earth began to transform violently. Immediately afterward, everyone felt an unparalleled suction force erupt from the starry sky. The gravitational force on the ground began to disappear, and heaven and earth began to flip. The inky black earth transformed into a black, rocky sky. The boundless starry sky began to materialize, transforming into an invisible earth. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, and the others were all sucked into the starry sky and plummeted relentlessly. Heaven and earth truly had been flipped upside down. They knew that they couldn't resist this process, and they definitely couldn't fly toward the black, rocky sky. Otherwise, they would be suppressed by the black, rocky sky. Chapter 804. How long did it take to fall from the inky black earth to the starry sky? And Lin didn't know how high the heavens were on the Tai Chu continent. However, in this vast land of blood, they weren't far from the starry sky. After plummeting for close to 100,000 meters, they crashed into a certain starry sky. 3 spirit beasts that did not manage to slow down in time and had low defenses were directly smashed into meat patties due to the fearsome falling momentum. Thump, thump, thump. A series of violent collisions erupted as the beast tribe, powerful beings, crashed into ground. They no longer paid any attention to Enlin and the others. Instead, they looked around with shock and horror on their faces. The biggest threat now was the starry sky, not Enlin and the others. Enlin also looked around to find that this entire space was extremely bright as the stars were right beside him, beneath his feet, and above his head. This time he was truly situated in a sea of stars. Dazzling starlight greeted him as far as his eyes could see. "There are so many stars, I'm feeling a little dizzy," Su Xiaolan grumbled. That's right, there were simply too many stars here, and they flashed as far as the eye could see. It was impossible to tell which direction to go, and they felt as if they were in a dream. And Lin couldn't help but think back to the stars in the divine mirror world. They weren't stars either, and they were very small, but they were imbued with the powerful power of stars. He couldn't help but think back to the pair of eyes and hands that had appeared in the starry sky. That was like the ruler of this world, and it possessed the power to topple the entire world. Could it be that a god of creation like Tina had appeared in this world? Gasp! A panicked cry suddenly sounded, and Lin turned to discover a crimson beetle trying to evade a star. The crimson beetle's body glowed with a metallic light, and its aura was vast and powerful. This was clearly a soul formation stage, soul beast. However, its speed was still slower than the star. However, the crimson beetle was still determined to escape. It knew that there was still a chance for it to survive. The two stars in the sky suddenly formed a thin line of white stars along the beetle's escape route with the power of the stars. Splat! The beetle didn't even have a chance to react before its body passed through the thin line. Like a piece of iron wire meeting tofu, its body was cut in half, and Lin drew a sharp intake of breath upon seeing this. Soul formation, initial stage soul beasts died here without any pressure. The stars here could kill. Some of the beasts tried to escape into the sky. Then they were suppressed by both the pitch-black sky and the starry sky. Their deaths were extremely miserable, and it was said that even their bones were smashed into pieces. If the beasts wanted to survive, they could only wait for the next inversion. The attacks of the stars seemed to be random as well. Therefore, the star-sea beasts that walked out alive might not be the strongest, but they would definitely be the luckiest. In this aspect, it was very similar to Heaven's judgment. It was very dependent on luck. Croak! And Lin, take me with you. The divine poison frog ran toward Enlin. Mu, Ao Nio, also arrived beside Enlin, and Su Xiaolan with a fawning expression. Even though this place was dependent on luck, Enlin and Su Xiaolan were extremely powerful, so perhaps they really did have a way to deal with the stars. Their strong desire to live caused the two beast race experts to be very enthusiastic and proactive. And Lin didn't say anything at the sight of these two beasts. The frog also expressed its stance at this moment. It wanted to follow Enlin no matter what, as if Enlin was the only one who could take it home. The peerless saber demon gritted its teeth with rage upon seeing this, but it didn't dare to act recklessly. It couldn't do anything about this. This starry sky was simply far too peculiar. Even with its power, it had to tread carefully. And Lin didn't look at the groundhog as he silently put away the frying pan in his left hand. He turned his gaze toward his feet. Even though he was standing in midair, he felt as if he were standing on some kind of invisible space. The darkness down below was still filled with specks of starlight, and there was no end in sight. Ah! Another wail of anguish erupted. One of the spirit beasts suddenly lost its footing, and its body began to plummet before being pulverized by the power of the stars. That's right. Even if you just stood there without moving, many unexpected dangers could still occur. This was the truly terrifying part about the starry sky. And Lin didn't want to be the passive type, so he focused his gaze on his surroundings and activated his divine inspection technique in an attempt to find some sort of pattern. Even the beast army hadn't experienced this place many times, so there had to be a lot of things that hadn't been discovered yet. Perhaps they could even find a way out. The divine inspection technique was known as the divine technique that could identify all things in the world. His eyes fell upon the starry sky, and he really did discover some things. "Come with me." And Lin's eyes turned snowy white as he suddenly made his way toward a certain direction. Su Xiaolan followed him without any hesitation. Ao Nio and the divine poison frog also followed behind Lin. Roar! At this moment, another beast was in danger. This was a purple lightning tiger, and it was clawing at its own face with both hands in a frenzy, as if it had fallen into some sort of deranged state. In the end, it killed itself. Some of the beasts looked on with shock and horror. The lightning tiger had clearly fallen into some sort of illusionary realm, upon which it killed itself. This was an extremely terrifying scene. They were filled with despair at the thought that their chances of survival were less than 10%, and they couldn't do anything other than wait for their deaths or rely on luck to survive. Yet another beast's feet were empty. The three-headed snake bird was so frightened that it immediately flapped its wings. However, the terrifying suction force coming from its feet still dragged it into the abyss of death. The terrifying scene continued. However, a very peculiar scene ensued. All of the beasts turned toward a certain spot in the starry sky with expressions of shock and confusion on their faces. There, and Lin was holding Su Xiaolan's hand in public, showing off to everyone. Tui! It was Lin holding Su Xiaolan's hand as he led Ao Nio and the divine poison frog on a stroll through the starry sky. That's right, they were strolling through the starry sky in an extremely leisurely manner. All of the beasts were astonished. This was a place that they viewed as a perilous situation of life and death. But Lin and the others were strolling through the starry sky as if they were taking a stroll in their backyard. They were even in the mood to look around and admire the beautiful scenery around them. Was this appropriate? Furthermore, their footsteps were extremely stable, and the stars around them were also extremely stable, indicating that they hadn't encountered any danger. Waves of shock surged through all of the beasts' hearts. Was this a coincidence, or had they discovered something? Most of the beasts felt like it was the latter. After all, if this was a coincidence, then only an idiot would wander around like this. Wouldn't that be suicidal? The golden groundhog, wielding its twin sabers, bared its front teeth as its golden for stood on end. And Lin and the others were getting closer and closer, and they were now making their way toward it. Chapter 805. The peerless saber demon glowered at the oncoming Lin with a fearful expression as its snowy white sabers flashed. And Lin paid no heed to the golden groundhog, and his footsteps faltered as he began to walk in another direction. The groundhog's expression faltered upon seeing this. Was that human scared? No. The groundhog came to its senses. That human was only following the path it had discovered. Many beasts had also discovered this, and their eyes were filled with envy and yearning. One side was facing a dire situation where there was less than a 10% chance of survival, while the other side was leisurely strolling through the starry sky, as if to say, "Danger? No way." How could the beasts feel at ease? A huge crocodile that was enshrouded in liquid shuddered, and its protective vital fluid also became murky. Jealousy had caused it to separate. One of the yellow-furred dogs even gritted its teeth, grinding them together as if it was saying, "I hate you." In contrast, the frog skipped along behind Lin with undisguised smugness and excitement on its face, as if it was saying, "See that? I've chosen the right side. I've found the right person." That's right, in a place like this, even riding on the right coattails was something to be proud of. After all, following Lin was the best way to get out of this dire situation. As for that short and fat groundhog, thank God I didn't follow it. It was standing on the spot like an idiot and didn't dare to move. And Lin's gaze fell on the stars around him as he maintained his divine inspection technique to quickly calculate some data. The positions of all the stars in this starry sky were constantly changing. They were like real stars that were being guided by a faint gravitational force, and they were evolving in extremely complex trajectories. Of course, This was very faint, and it would be very difficult to detect unless one was extremely focused. The light released by each and every star stacked on top of one another before converging beneath one's feet to form the supporting power of this starry sky. The power of the stars was different, and so were the distances and strengths of the stars. All the stars in the sky were changing positions, so the stacking power beneath one's feet would naturally change as well. When there wasn't enough power, the supporting power beneath one's feet would disappear, and one would be engulfed by the starry sky. And Lin released his divine sense to the fullest and activated his divine inspection technique this entire time in order to find a better path, a path that gathered the most starlight. The distribution of the stars, their brightness, their orbits, the power gathered under their feet. All the stars within a radius of dozens of miles were within his calculations. His journey was very steady. Reality proved that his judgment was correct. A black wolf couldn't hold it in any longer and took the initiative to rush towards Enlin, wanting to follow behind him. However, the two stars near Heilang seemed to have been stimulated by something and took the initiative to crash into Heilang. Bang! Bang! Black Wolf's body was pierced through, and he died tragically in the starry sky. And Lin glanced at the wolf, then at the star that was suspended in the void after the Black Wolf was killed. He had a guess in his heart. It seemed like the attack of the stars was also related to the density of the overlapping starlight under his feet. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the further Lin and the others walked, the closer they got to the red floating island. Looking up, they could already see the densely packed mushroom houses in the air. This was a very strange feeling, as if there was a completely upside-down world above their heads. I don't know if I'm hallucinating, but I feel like the red light emanating from the mushroom in the center seems to have weakened. Su Xiaolan suddenly said, and Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he turned toward the red light that seemed to be emanating from the center of the mushroom. The red light was gentle and rippling like water. It really isn't as dazzling as before, and Lin exclaimed. This was an extremely important discovery, and Lin and the others knew that the attack of the restriction was made up of this red light. Now that the red light had become gentler, would the power of the restriction change? And Lin turned toward the frog. Ribbit? The divine poison frog looked at Lin with a confused expression, and had blushed involuntarily at the sight of his invasive gaze. Big Boss and Lin, what are you trying to do? Why are you looking at me like that? All right, and Lin was initially a little hesitant, but it looked like he should just send this frog out to test it out. Otherwise, there would be a misunderstanding. This thought had only just appeared in Lin's mind when he sensed another creature approaching him from behind. He turned around to discover a huge python whose body seemed to be enshrouded in darkness. The python was silently following his path with a pair of yellow eyes that were staring at him cautiously, ready to escape at a moment's notice. And Lin, trying to suck up to him? And Lin chuckled coldly in his heart. I'm sorry, but it's not that easy to suck up to. Furthermore, you've really underestimated me. You really won't be able to escape from such a short distance. He spread open his wings of wind and instantly tore through space. In that instant, the shadow python was struck by an extreme sense of peril. It immediately fled into the darkness without any hesitation. However, a golden light had already appeared behind it, and a vast golden fist of pure yang tore through the darkness before crashing down upon its body. Boom! Terrifying golden light exploded in the starry sky. All of the beast tribe powerful beings were dumbstruck. The groundhog was also dumbstruck. He attacked? How dare he? This was an extremely perilous place to begin with, so no one would think about fighting or escaping. This was also the reason why the shadow python was following Enlin. However, Enlin attacked without any hesitation. With a mountain-quaking fist, he smashed the shadow python until it was dizzy. Then, like a general who had just won a battle, he swaggered back to the group with the 30-meter-long python on his shoulder. What are you doing? The shadow python's body convulsed with fear. and Lin unleashed his lightning manipulation technique over and over again to paralyze the python's meridians, thereby rendering it powerless to resist. He didn't hide anything. "I'm going to send you to the heavens." The shadow python was dumbstruck. What did that mean? And Lin pointed up at the inverted floating continent in the sky with a smile. "I'm giving you a chance to obtain the Kirin blood jade. Are you touched?" The shadow python came to its senses and roared. "I can kill snakes, but I can't humiliate them. I'm not going to become a guinea pig for lowly humans like you." Lowly humans. And Lin blinked. "That's not what you said when you risked your life to suck up to me. The shadow python." And Lin continued, "I'm going to toss you into the sky, so you'll definitely be struck by both the starry sky and the inky black sky. Your only chance of survival is to try and get to that crimson floating continent with all your might. Heaven and earth have been flipped upside down, so perhaps the restrictions there will also change. Everything will depend on your strength and luck. You're a soul formation intermediate stage soul beast, so I have faith in you." The shadow python was completely unmoved by Lin's words of encouragement. In fact, it even wanted to curse. No, it was already cursing. "I% MMP and #Yen. Ah." And Lin let loose a blood-curdling cry, and the shadow python was hurled toward the upside-down floating continent like a cannonball. Chapter 806. The shadow python was in despair. The terrifying power forced it to fly toward the crimson floating continent in the sky. The white star on the ground had already begun to move, and it flew into the sky as a streak of white light. A certain power also descended from the inky black sky. Right now it had no way out. It could only go all out. The shadow python roared as it unleashed all of its power, and its body transformed into a black shadow as it flew toward the floating continent in the distance. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, and all the other beasts all turned toward the shadow python. Its fate would decide the fate of everyone else to a certain extent. The crimson continent wasn't actually very far away from the starry sky. The shadow python quickly entered the 1,000-meter radius of the restriction, and it continued to descend upon the crimson continent. Boom! The ground exploded, and dust and debris flew through the air as the shadow python slowly reappeared. What was even more exhilarating was that the star seemed to have lost its target, and it circled around in a daze before slowly returning to the starry sky. The power descending from the inky black sky also disappeared, and Lin clenched his fists as he stared intently at the red light in the sky. Whoosh! The red light twisted and converged to form a series of thin red energy lines before flying toward the shadow python at a speed that struck despair into the onlookers' hearts. The shadow python had no choice but to fight. It unleashed its soul formation intermediate stage power to the fullest, and an inky black shield enshrouded its entire body. The extremely dense energy lines formed a net, and they sliced through the shadow python's body like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Crack! Bam! The shadow python's shield shattered, but its body was completely unscathed. And Lin took a deep breath as his eyes lit up. "I'm fine. We did it." The shadow python also faltered for a moment. It clearly didn't think that it would actually survive. However, it quickly came to its senses and charged toward the center of the floating continent. That upside-down floating continent's gravity is centered around the surface of the floating continent after entering the range of the restriction. There's clearly some kind of law that's isolated it from the outside world. Now is the best time to enter that place. And Lin spoke with excitement. "Let's go." Su Xiaolan couldn't wait any longer. The two of them, a cow and a frog, began to charge toward the floating island. The groundhogs and all of the surviving beasts also unleashed all of their powers to rush toward that continent. Obtaining the Qilin blood jade was one of the reasons, but leaving this damned place with an extremely high death rate was the most important reason. Streaks of light flew toward the upside-down continent. In the starry sky, countless dazzling stars pursued relentlessly, like a waterfall of stars rushing into the sky. The scene was extremely spectacular, but those stars were not scenery, they were terrible killers. The giant shadow python didn't die because it was a soul beast of the soul formation intermediate stage and possessed a certain level of power. The other spirit nurturing stage, spirit beasts, weren't so lucky. One after another, the spirit beasts were pierced by the stars, screaming as they died. Some of the faster flying spirit beasts managed to enter the range of the Crimson Continent's restriction with great difficulty, only to be sliced into hundreds of pieces by the merciless energy threads. In the end, the groundhogs and the other 2 Divine Guardian Squad members were the only ones who managed to survive. All of them were soul beasts at the soul formation, pinnacle stage, and Lin and the others landed on the ground before the groundhogs, and they were already pursuing the giant shadow python. No, to put it more accurately, they were participating in the battle for the Qilin Blood Jade. It was undoubtedly the case that the Qilin Blood Jade was most likely located in the glowing mushroom at the very center of the continent. The giant shadow python unleashed its shadow evasion technique, and its slender body transformed into a black shadow as it crept toward the mushroom at an extremely fast speed. It had no choice but to obtain the Qilin Blood Jade in order to reach the pinnacle of its snake life. It was close. The giant shadow python raised its head, and it could already see the alluring light emanating from the mushroom building. Ha ha ha! Qilin Blood Jade, here I come! The giant shadow python was extremely excited as it unleashed its divine sense to the fullest extent in an attempt to locate the Qilin Blood Jade. It then sensed something beside it. A red figure flashed down from the doorway of another mushroom building, and a cold sword tore through the darkness before puncturing the giant shadow python's head with extreme accuracy. Hiss! The giant shadow python let loose a blood-curdling cry as it whipped its tail toward the red figure. Whoosh! The red figure flashed backward, and the sharp blade in its hand slashed an arc through the python's body. The giant shadow python felt a chill run down its neck, immediately followed by an indescribable agony. Splat! The python's head was completely severed. It let loose a heart-wrenching wail of anguish as the 2 halves of its body convulsed violently on the ground before finally perishing, and Lin and Su Xiaolin's expressions became a lot more grave upon seeing the red figure. A crimson wercat suddenly appeared in front of them. It held a crimson long sword in its hand, and its aura was vast and terrifying, even more so than that of the demonic blood beasts they had encountered on the mutant blood phoenix. However, and Lin didn't even look at it. Instead, he unleashed a bolt of golden void lightning to the side without any hesitation. Boom! Thunderclaps erupted into the heavens, and the crimson mushroom building was pulverized amid a clash of golden lightning. A red figure hurtled back in retreat as a sinister cackle reverberated through the air. Ha ha! The food this time is a high-grade ingredient. Be careful, goat god. The other party must be quite powerful to be able to detect you. The humanoid cat shook off the blood on its sword, and even though it was warning Enlin to be careful, it continued to make its way toward Enlin with its graceful catwalk. This is a good opportunity. They've been stalled. The groundhog was ecstatic upon seeing this, and it immediately tried to avoid the demonic blood beasts in order to attack the mushroom building from the side. However, it didn't even get a chance to rejoice for 3 seconds before a massive hammer suddenly fell from the sky. This hammer was several hundred meters wide, and it encompassed the groundhog and the other 2 members of the Divine Guardian Squad. Boom! The massive hammer fell, and the earth tremored violently. An intense battle had already erupted on the outskirts of the mushroom building. However, the interior of the mushroom building at the very center was very quiet. A creature enshrouded in black shadow picked up a transparent cup of crimson wine and took a small sip. Beside the black shadow creature were 2 beings with equally terrifying auras. They lay prone on the ground, looking through the wall at the scene outside. A blue flying tiger with countless skulls dangling from its wings narrowed its eyes. There's an aura that I hate very much among the newcomers, a monster with the body of a goat and the face of a human spoke in a slow voice. "I'm hungry. I really want to eat." "Don't be in such a hurry. The delicious food is about to arrive, so let's soak it for a while." The black shadow creature placed the cup on the table and tapped it on the table with a sound that reverberated throughout the entire continent. Boom! Boundless crimson blood instantly began to gush forth from the crimson ground. Blood instantly surged over the entire continent, accompanied by the anguished wails and despair of the dead. Heaven and earth transformed into a crimson purgatory. A thought suddenly appeared in Lin's mind as he stared at this abrupt and terrifying scene. Could it be that this was the true, vast land of blood? Chapter 807. Crimson blood surged on the ground below at a certain moment, and Lin sensed a certain power that made his heart palpitate. He turned toward the massive mushroom building. "Is it over there?" "You're fighting me, and you still have the time to look elsewhere?" The crimson humanoid cat strode toward Lin, and its long sword flicked through the air before it disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, the humanoid cat had already appeared before Lin, and its crimson long sword stabbed toward Lin's heart. And Lin also reacted extremely quickly, and he thrust his evil-slaying sword toward the humanoid cat. Boom! The two swords collided, and sword intent surged forth as a wave of blood swept through the air, and the buildings within a radius of several hundred meters were instantly pulverized into dust. And Lin's hand was numb from the impact of the sword strike, and the humanoid cat was forced to retreat in an agile manner. Mihaha! A burst of dissolute laughter suddenly erupted. The humanoid goat monster appeared behind Lin, and a crimson spike extended from its hand toward Lin's neck. However, the fur on its body instantly stood on end, and it immediately turned around with its arms raised in front of its body. White holy flames swept forth, completely engulfing both it and Lin. Boom! Flames exploded, and the terrifying holy flames fanned out in a fan shape, engulfing everything in its path. Su Xiaolan was a little perplexed. Why did her enemies always ignore her existence and create opportunities for her to launch sneak attacks? The humanoid goat also ignored her this time as it focused all of its attention on Lin, thereby exposing its back to her. Did it really think that she was a piece of trash like Aonyo the frog? Su Xiaolan was a little angry, so she immediately unleashed a red-hot sword slash at the arrogant humanoid goat. Due to the fact that she had unleashed her full power, and Lin was naturally also within her attack range. However, Su Xiaolan wasn't worried in the slightest. She was well aware of just how thick Lin's skin was. This bit of fire wasn't enough to cook Wang Ban. Bah! The goat man's back was torn apart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he retreated. His blood-red body looked like it was about to evaporate. Cough, cough, cough! Xiaolan, are you trying to murder your husband? And Lin complained as he walked out of the flames with his clothes in tatters. Su Xiaolan pursed her lips. Stop pretending. Let's beat those two demonic blood beasts first. And Lin tore off his white robe, and his storage ring flashed as a brand new set of clothes appeared over his body. The frog and Aonyo had already retreated behind the scenes and were looking on at the battle in the distance with shock and horror on their faces. Moo! Those two demonic blood beasts were the most powerful demonic blood beasts I've ever seen. Their power has already transcended beyond the soul formation stage. Aonyo exclaimed. The frog was also envious. Croak! Yes, I've only felt such power from the captain of the Divine Guardian Squad, the peerless saber demon. As expected of the most supremely talented human cultivators, and Lin and Su Xiaolan are able to hold their own against them even though they're only at the soul formation intermediate stage. Go, Croak! Moo! Kill them! The two beasts roared with all their might. A faint smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. Do you feel more motivated now that there's a spectator cheering you on? And Lin, the humanoid cat and goat man were no longer in the mood to flex. In particular, the The humanoid goat man was already quite fearful of Su Xiaolan after being struck by that flame slash. It felt like if Su Xiaolan used any more force, it would definitely be reduced to ashes. Cat God, let's switch opponents, the humanoid goat man suggested. Huh. The humanoid cat blinked. Didn't you always think you're more powerful than me? I admit it, so let's switch opponents. I feel like that man is easier to bully, the humanoid goat man continued. And Lin. He couldn't pretend that he didn't hear that. He had been underestimated. Meow. Great. I was waiting for you to say that. I'll insta-kill this terrifying enemy that almost insta-killed you. A smug smile appeared on the humanoid cat's face, clearly agreeing to the humanoid goat man's request. Su Xiaolan. He couldn't pretend that he didn't hear that. He had been underestimated. Su Xiaolan's eyes turned a pure golden color as she made her way toward the humanoid cat. The humanoid cat's smile faded at the sight of Su Xiaolan making her way toward him. A terrifying intent soared into the heavens as he raised his sword to his eyebrows and adopted a lunging stance. A boundless red light erupted from the crimson long sword, and the blood on the ground was parted to reveal a vast expanse of pure space. The ground was unable to bear the heavy burden, and inky black cracks began to appear, extending all the way to Su Xiaolan's feet. Heaven and earth had been split open before the sword had even been unleashed. It had to be said that the humanoid cat's attack was very much like a top-rate sword immortal's. Bam! The humanoid cat's agile body instantly tore through the air as the power of the crimson sword converged at the tip of his sword. There was no earth-shattering sword projection, only an extremely sharp sword projection. The space in the wake of the crimson sword shattered, and it was as if nothing could stand in its way as it flew directly toward the woman's heart. Su Xiaolan's expression remained calm as she stepped forward, as if she were taking the initiative to meet the oncoming sword projection. At the same time, the power of her domain was instantly unleashed. Boom! Boundless holy vermilion flames and true dragon lightning erupted in that instant. Phenomena appeared between heaven and earth as an azure dragon circled in the sky with devastating lightning, and a vermilion bird flew through the air with holy flames from the 9 heavens. In the face of such terrifying power, the humanoid cat gritted his teeth and pierced through the lightning and holy flames with his charred body as he persisted in unleashing his sure-kill sword strike. The crimson sword pierced through the air with unstoppable force before stabbing toward the woman's heart. Die. The humanoid cat threw caution to the wind and achieved a breakthrough in his sword technique in this critical moment of life and death. It was also in that instant that the azure dragon revolved around Su Xiaolan's body, materializing into a substantial form. The crimson light clashed with the azure dragon, upon which an earth-shattering screeching sound erupted. Break through! The humanoid cat abandoned all of its defenses and allowed the holy flames and lightning to wreak havoc on its body in order to maximize its offensive power. Crack! The azure dragon barrier began to shatter. Abandon all of my defenses? Do you think I don't know how to swing my sword? Su Xiaolan's voice was pleasant to the ear, but her tone was extremely calm. A chill suddenly ran down the humanoid cat's spine. It turned to look at Su Xiaolan, only to be greeted by a pair of holy golden eyes, as well as the sword strike descending upon it. The humanoid cat suddenly realized that it had never truly understood just how powerful this woman before it was. It had overestimated its own power and severely underestimated its opponent's power. Boom! This sword strike was imbued with the extremely powerful power of the vermilion bird, evaporating the sea of blood in its wake and incinerating all things in its wake, leaving a trail of flames in its wake that was several kilometers in length. The humanoid cat that had abandoned all of its defenses was completely annihilated by this sword strike. Not only was the humanoid cat affected, but the humanoid goat behind it was also struck by this sword strike. After all, they were standing one in front of the humanoid cat. While the humanoid goat's sword strike was extremely long and wide, extending for several kilometers. Thankfully, the humanoid goat reacted in time to defend itself. However, it was also severely wounded by this sword strike and hurtled back in retreat. As expected, that human woman was very powerful. It had made the right decision to switch out the humanoid cat as it had been insta-killed. However, its decision was also wrong. Even though it had overestimated Su Xiaolan, it had actually underestimated Su Xiaolan. This sword strike was a clear proof of that. It was just a spectator who hadn't even fought, yet it had been severely wounded by the shockwaves of the battle. However, the humanoid goat soon discovered that it was still wrong. When Enlin rushed toward it at a speed that it couldn't even comprehend, it realized that it had been wrong. It really didn't make any difference whether it switched its opponent or not. This human man was also a freak. Chapter 808. The humanoid goat was already severely wounded, so it was very difficult for it to evade Enlin's sword strike. A black sword projection imbued with the true intent of the endless night tore through the humanoid goat's body in a domineering manner. Su Xiaolan slew one with one sword strike, while Enlin delivered the finishing blow. Their teamwork was flawless, and they secured a clean victory. Clap, clap, clap. The divine poison frog clapped its hands excitedly. Ribbit! Top-notch! He was able to secure victory against such a powerful, demonic blood beast with a single strike. He's so powerful. This kind of power is really shocking. Moo! Ao Neo nodded with all its might. He's worthy of being my mount. Boom, boom, boom nearby. Another earth-shattering explosion erupted, and Lin turned toward that direction. The peerless saber demon and its two divine guardian squad members were engaged in an intense battle against a demonic blood beast dragon pig wielding a massive hammer. The dragon pig was a monster with a dragon's head and a pig's body. It had a violent temper, and it held a crimson hammer in its hand, which it swung toward the three beasts in a frenzy. The golden groundhog also had a violent temper, and it swung its sabers through the air, unleashing a boundless saber domain for over a kilometer. Every time the two of them clashed, it was as if divine thunder had erupted. Energy surged through the air, creating a vacuum within a radius of over 100 meters. Gale force winds swept through the surroundings, and the earth crumbled. The other two beasts watched from the sidelines, unleashing spell techniques in tandem with the groundhog's attacks, and they were able to gain quite a bit of an advantage. And Lin and Su Xiaolan didn't have time to admire this battle. They were competitors with the groundhog, and now that they had taken care of their enemies, they naturally had to take this opportunity to fight for the final treasure. The two of them didn't hesitate for much before charging toward the huge mushroom. At this moment, within the huge mushroom building, the monster with a goat's body and a human face licked its lips, its blood-red eyes flashing with greed as it said excitedly, "This delicacy is on the walk, but the chef is dead." The blue flying tiger with a skull hanging from its wings asked in an indifferent voice, "Gluttony, what are you trying to do?" The humanoid goat put on what it thought was a gentle smile. "How about I eat it raw?" "Humph, all you think about is eating." The blue flying tiger glanced at the monster beside it. "They barged in without our permission, so they naturally have to be punished. Kill them all and rob them all. Eat it all. Isn't this what we should be doing?" Tao Tai, who had a goat's body and a human face, chuckled. "You're really bad." The blue flying tiger scolded. Then a strange smile appeared on its face. "But I like—" The black figure sitting in the middle tapped the table with his fingertips. "Logically speaking, those two humans are much stronger than we imagined. Qiong-Chi, Tao Tai, don't kill them. They may be the key to me getting out. Well, I won't kill them, but I want to eat all the other beasts." The Tao Tai grinned. "Let's go out. If we fight inside, it won't be good if we damage the house," Qiong-Chi said indifferently. Just like that, two extremely terrifying, ferocious beasts broke through the door. Silence returned to the room. Only the sound of the black figure tapping on the table could be heard. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. An extremely dazzling light emanated from within the huge mushroom, enough to turn a floating continent into a dazzling star. However, it was completely dark here. There were only two lights that seemed like eternal candles that continued to burn. The blood is becoming more and more active. This pot is boiling hot. We can put meat in. An ethereal voice sounded outside the huge mushroom, and Lin and Su Xiaolan were already less than a kilometer away. The groundhog was extremely panicked upon seeing this, and it had no choice but to unleash an extremely taxing mystic technique. Single strike of the ocean. It held the saber with both hands, and the saber gleam was like snow as it soared into the sky. The vast power of the saber swept through the world. Thus, the groundhog unleashed 18 saber projections toward the dragon pig. Holy F***CK! Where's the single strike of the ocean? The dragon pig was both shocked and enraged at the sight of the 18 terrifying saber projections. Not only were the groundhog's saber projections extremely powerful, but they were also unbelievably fast. One saber projection after another exploded, but the dragon pig's body was still lacerated. The saber projection you wanted is here. After unleashing 18 slashes, the groundhog's aura suddenly climbed once again, and another peerless saber projection fell, shimmering with a translucent light. This saber projection was as white as the boundless snowy sky, and it was both powerful and beautiful at the same time. The dragon pig roared as crimson lightning revolved around its massive hammer, and it unleashed all of its power to strike the groundhog's terrifying saber projection. Boom! Energy exploded from this collision, and heaven and earth tremored violently. The saber projection and lightning intertwined as shockwaves erupted for several kilometers. The dragon pig finally managed to defend against the groundhog's attack with all its might. The golden groundhog opened its mouth to reveal its front teeth, and it twisted its wrist as its snowy white saber slashed through the air in a trajectory that struck despair into the dragon pig's heart. Ah, double strike of the ocean. The dragon pig was dumbstruck, and it only came to its senses now. The groundhog had two sabers. F***CK off. Second strike. The snowy white saber projection instantly engulfed the dragon pig, which didn't have time to defend itself. Its body was pulverized by the saber projection amid a blood-curdling squeal. Haha! The groundhog finally secured victory, and it chortled with glee. A peculiar flush appeared on its face, as if it had overexerted itself. Let's go. The peerless saber demon didn't dare to waste any more time, and it immediately commanded its two subordinates to charge toward the massive mushroom building. At this moment, Lin and Su Xiaolan also sensed the dragon pig's defeat, and they ran even faster. However, they suddenly stopped in their tracks as they looked up at the top of the mushroom building with grave expressions. Ao Nio and the frog were both extremely powerful beings, and they immediately stopped in their tracks upon seeing this. Then, they ran toward a mushroom house to use as cover. Haha, humans! Surrender now, or you'll suffer unnecessary torture. A blue flying tiger flew toward Lin from the rooftop as it chortled with glee. Two crimson fangs dripping with blood could be seen protruding from its mouth, and the skulls on its wings seemed to be playing a peculiar tune. Another figure appeared with an extremely fearsome aura. Eat. We'll eat you all. The monster with the body of a goat and the face of a human took a glance at Lin and Su Xiaolan before focusing its attention on a mushroom building nearby. Ha! Lust, I'm going to have an appetizer. I'll leave those two humans to you. It ignored the two humans on the ground as it spoke, and it flew toward the mushroom building. Gluttony, don't forget what we're here for, the blue flying tiger said in a cold voice. I don't have to worry with you here. I'll be back soon. The monster atop the cloud of flames transformed into a streak of light as it flew toward a certain direction. Ao Neo and the divine poison frog both shuddered with fear upon seeing this. That was because the monster was heading in their direction. Chapter 809. And Lin's expression became even more grave upon hearing the conversation between the two monsters. Gluttony? Wasn't that one of the four great ferocious beasts of the sinister spirit beast cesspool that would eat itself when it went berserk? Lust was even more of a weirdo. As one of the four great ferocious beasts, it was said that it loved to join in on the fun. It would run to wherever there was a battle, and it especially liked to land the killing blow. For example, if a powerful being with a vendetta finally managed to kill a murderous beast, Lust would immediately pounce over and eat the powerful being. Who knew how many prodigies who were planning to defy the natural order had died in Lust's stomach? Not only that, but it was also a being that would clap its hands and cheer on its friends for doing evil deeds, and it was a being that was extremely jealous of those who did good to it. The four great ferocious beasts were all loyal to the demonic blood Kirin. Who would have thought that two of them would appear here? And Lin's expression finally shifted. Aren't they already dead? Apparently, they're all fearsome beings at the return to Void Pinnacle stage. But from the looks of it, there's clearly something wrong with their auras. Could it be that they're fake four great ferocious beasts? Su Xiaolan was in disbelief, but she didn't dare to get complacent. Even the auras that they were currently displaying were extremely terrifying. As he spoke, and Lin's storage ring had already started to flash, a silver figure suddenly appeared and chased after Gluttony at lightning speed. Gundam 3, his trump card. Boom! A purple gravitational field was unleashed, enshrouding Gluttony before unleashing an extremely terrifying power of suppression. Gluttony's flight faltered, and it plummeted toward the ground. Ao Neo and the frog were trembling in fear and despair, but tears began to flow from their eyes at the sight of Enlin's powerful reinforcements. Humph! A mere puppet wants to stand in my way. I'm going to eat you. Gluttony roared with rage as the flaming cloud beneath its feet surged like gale force winds, and it was able to pounce toward Gundam 3 at a pretty fast speed despite the gravitational field. Gundam 3 unleashed a gravitational field with one hand while materializing a particle sword with the other, slashing a blue arc of energy through the air. Gluttony reacted extremely quickly, and the cloud of flames beneath its feet abruptly exploded as it evaded Gundam 3's attack. It then quickly closed in on Gundam 3 and opened its mouth. Its face was originally the size of a normal human face, but when it opened its mouth was even larger than its head. It was like a giant, dark mouth with eerie white teeth inside. I'm starting. Gluttony bit toward Gundam 3's head. Kacha, boom! A clear and crisp sound rang out. Roar! The Tautai held miserably as he retreated, his teeth chattering. What exactly is this puppet made of? Why is it so hard? Gundam 3 wasn't going to reply to him. After all, he was a man of few words. He unleashed all types of energy waves with one hand and continued to swing the particle sword in his other hand, unleashing a torrential barrage of attacks. Gluttony let loose a strange cry as flaming blade projections materialized on its claws. Gundam 3's power was comparable to that of a mighty figure at the pinnacle of the return to Void initial stage. Even so, Gluttony was able to hold its own against it. In the area where the two sides fought, destructive energy swept out, turning it into a land of death. Croak! How terrifying! Is this really a place that only soul formation stage mighty figures can enter? A battle of this caliber is definitely a battle between return to Void stage mighty figures. The divine poison frog was astonished. Moo, have you forgotten about those immortal beasts that have gone insane? Aonyo asked. The divine poison frog choked upon hearing this. Aonyo continued. What's most astonishing to me is that Enlin still has such a terrifying trump card up his sleeve. With this kind of power and this kind of puppet, they can do whatever they want in our beast tribe army. Their only opponents have always been the living beings of this world. Gluttony and Gundam 3 were locked in a stalemate. Lust finally put away its frivolous expression as it looked at the two humans before it with a solemn expression. That's right, these two humans had the right to make it take them seriously. Roar. Does that mean you're not going to surrender? Lust stood on all fours and glared at Lin as a twisted reddish-brown energy burst forth from its body. And Lin's brows furrowed slightly. He had detected an extremely terrifying power with his powerful divine sense, but it didn't originate from these two ferocious beasts. At this moment, 3 figures had already charged toward the huge mushroom building at an extremely fast speed, while Lin and the others were still engaged in battle. The golden groundhog, blue flame skeletal bird, and 8-armed lion king were all soul beasts at the soul formation pinnacle stage, and all of them wore expressions of excitement and anxiety. They were the fishermen who were waiting to reap the spoils of war, and this was an extremely satisfying feeling. However, strangely enough, Lust's expression remained unchanged upon seeing this, and Lin was even less nervous upon seeing this. He decided to let the groundhog scout ahead for now. Lust shot a glance at Gluttony, which was still engaged in battle, and it knew that it would most likely be unable to land the killing blow. As such, it had to capture those 2 humans first. It looked at Lin and Su Xiaolan with a cautious expression. It didn't attack, but the aura emanating from its body was becoming more and more fearsome. Gluttony, gluttony! The blood on the ground began to bubble and churn. Lust was only around 30 to 40 feet tall, but its wings were extremely large, with a wingspan of over 100 feet. There were countless skulls hanging from its wings, and a peculiar red light began to shimmer within its hollow eyes. Sinister cackles erupted from within the skulls, creating sound waves that swept toward the 2 of them. This was a prelude to battle, and it was also a form of psychological pressure. And Lin had been through many battles, so he was naturally not going to be affected by tricks like this. Are you sure you want to resist? I want to capture you alive, so there's still a chance that you'll survive. However, if you resist and I accidentally kill you during the battle, that won't be good. Qiong-Chi slowly strode forward and guided them patiently, and Lin looked up at the mushroom building behind Lust. 3 soul beasts have already gone to fight for the Kirin blood jade. Aren't you going to do anything? Let them go. They're just feeding themselves to us. Lust wasn't concerned in the slightest as it chuckled, and Lin nodded upon hearing this. The Kirin blood jade really was there. However, there was still a powerful force guarding the Kirin blood jade, which was something to be wary of. As such, it was better to take care of the problem before them first. Lust was still slowly approaching Lin, and its inky black tail was raised high into the air with a cold glint glinting from its tip. The bones on its wings crackled as it laughed and sang. And Lin's eyes turned snowy white, and he stepped forward, plunging heaven and earth into absolute darkness. All of the fur on Lust's body stood on end as its 5 senses were stripped away, and its divine sense was obscured as killing intent enshrouded the entire air. Heavenly demon bone barrier. It unleashed a protective ability without any hesitation. An energy barrier constructed from the projection of a heavenly demon's skull instantly appeared, wrapping itself around its body like an impenetrable fortress. A sharp screeching sound erupted at this moment. Lust's body was knocked flying by a burst of enormous force, but it had managed to block that fearsome attack in the end. However, it was suddenly struck by a sense of loss. Oh, so you have such an interesting ability hidden up your sleeve. Perfect, let me use it. And Lin chuckled lightly. Light returned to heaven and earth. Lust's senses returned to normal after being knocked flying by the sword projection. Before it even had a chance to come to its senses, it was greeted by the sight of a woman flying toward it with the power of wind and lightning. The blue lightning and scorching, holy flames of the dragon sparrow sword intertwined harmoniously with one another, and its sword intent had even exceeded that of some return to void stage mighty figures. This high-rank immortal tool was a perfect match for Su Xiaolan's bloodline, thereby allowing it to unleash its most powerful attack. Lust barely managed to protect its head with its claws before the dragon sparrow sword fell. Chapter 8:10. Boom! Holy flames and lightning fused together to create an unstoppable force. This was a fast and vicious attack. The sword was like lightning and the might of the sun, reducing everything in its wake to ashes. Su Xiaolan unleashed an attack comparable to that of a return to void stage mighty figure. Lust raised its claws in front of itself and was blasted back several hundred meters by the sword strike. Its entire body was charred black, and a massive gash had appeared on both of its arms. How could she be so powerful? Lust was astonished, and it had only just raised its head when a green figure appeared before its eyes. Su Xiaolan wielded her dragon sparrow sword, and the blade of her sword rotated to the side of the bright blue lightning before crashing down upon Lust like a bolt of lightning. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The blade of the sword was imbued with dazzling lightning as it slashed through the air in a series of extremely sharp trajectories. Lust didn't dare to underestimate its opponent, and its claws also transformed into a series of afterimages to defend against her sword strikes. The human woman before it was already very powerful, and with the enhancements from her high-rank immortal tool, each and every one of her sword strikes had the power to wound it. Lust didn't think that a soul formation stage human could be this powerful. However, after battling for a while, Lust realized that she had expended a lot of her power in that attack, and she was definitely going to lose if she continued to battle. Now was the time to retaliate. Lust's expression darkened, and it slapped the dragon sparrow sword aside with its claws while its tail abruptly pierced towards Su Xiaolan's glabella like a bolt of black lightning. Lightning flashed beneath Su Xiaolan's feet, and she used her lightning flash movement technique to evade Lust's attack by a hair's breadth before hurtling back in retreat. A few strands of hair fell from the sky, all of which had been severed by Lust's tail. All of a sudden, the blood on the entire continent began to churn violently. Xiaolan, the time you've bought for me is over. It's my turn now. How dare it touch your hair? I'll make sure it has nothing left. And Lin harumphed coldly with rage in his voice. Qiongqi had actually been paying attention to Lin's actions, but from the beginning to the end, it didn't know what that man was doing. Now that he finally made a move, it couldn't help but be cautious. Rise, undead with demonic blood. And Lin spread out his hands, palms facing the sky. The blood on the land surged violently, then condensed. Woo, woo, woo. For a moment, the cries of tens of thousands of beasts and the shrill screams of ghosts reverberated through the entire space. The power of the earth rose, and the power of death was gathering. Qiongqi's eyes widened as he stared at the scene before him in shock. This power, this move, why did it feel so familiar? One demonic blood beast after another began to appear, and they opened their bloodthirsty eyes as terrifying auras proliferated outward. All of them were glaring at Qiongqi with hatred and resentment. Qiongqi was dumbfounded. F***CK. Isn't this the power of my demonic blood dead souls? It can temporarily summon the power of the beasts in the blood for its own use. Just as they were speaking, and Lin had already materialized over 100 demonic blood beasts, each of which possessed the power of a soul formation stage soul beast. Qiongqi's expression changed, and he panicked. How can you have such power? Humph. Don't be too complacent. I can do it too. Watch me. It spread its wings and roared. Roar! Waves of blood surged through the vast sea of blood as a result of its roar. That was it, Qiongqi. Where's my demonic blood dead soul power? Just as it was in a daze, and Lin smiled faintly and waved his hand. Go. So. Over 100 demonic blood beasts pounced toward Qiongqi with devastating might. Damn it! Qiongqi roared, and the skulls on its wings also opened their mouths and roared. Countless sounds stacked together, forming a black, destructive shockwave that spread out. Divine ability, Sinfiend Roar. The voice, which was filled with boundless evil, transformed into a substantial power that enveloped the world. Arrogance was like frost, freezing the space. Laziness was like a dream, shrouded in fog. Jealousy was like a knife, shattering and cutting. His rage was like fire, burning everything. Greed was like a fog, corroding the void. The Tautai was like a mouth, devouring all living beings. Desire was like a demon, tearing apart the soul. The power of the 7 sins combined to form the most terrifying sound wave that proliferated into the surroundings. Over 100 powerful demonic blood beasts were almost completely annihilated in that instant. Even Enlin, who was relatively close to Cheongchi, was caught up in the shockwave, and his body was blasted back before collapsing into a pool of blood. If it weren't for the fact that his consciousness and physical body were both like hacks, a normal soul formation stage cultivator would probably be bleeding from all 7 orifices and dying already. Howl! Roar! Cheongchi tore into the few remaining demonic blood beasts that were still struggling at death's door with rage, and it quickly killed all of them. It panted heavily, having clearly expended a lot of its energy to unleash the Sin Fiend roar. And Lin was also in a bad state. Using the power that Cheongchi was most proud of was also extremely taxing on his own energy. He was now completely exhausted, and his condition was perhaps even worse than Cheongchi's. Haha, you've lost. I'm going to kill you. Cheongchi had clearly realized this, and a sinister smile appeared on its face as it pounced toward Lin. And Lin chuckled. Have I lost? No, I still have a girlfriend. His voice had only just fallen when the woman in a jade dress had already positioned herself in front of him, and the might of her dragon sparrow sword pierced through the air toward lust. Howl! Cheongchi roared with grief and indignation. Why? This isn't fair. Why is it so lonely? Cheongchi experienced the despair of a single dog. 2-on-1, and this was a tag team battle. How the F***CK was it supposed to fight like this? Wasn't this just bullying? And Lin stood up and silently swallowed a first-grade spirit pill to replenish his blood. The energy within his body quickly recovered. Not only was he going to fight 2-on-1, but he was also going to swallow pills. Boom! The energy within and Lin's body swelled drastically as he unleashed the power of the demonic blood dead spirits again. The blood on the ground churned again as one demonic blood beasts after another began to materialize. The pressure of love and money struck Cheongchi with a sense of despair. After a period of rest, Su Xiaolan was back to her peak condition. Each of her sword strikes was imbued with extremely powerful power, and she didn't even need to think about conserving her energy. After all, even if she ran out of energy, she still had Enlin to back her up. Howl! Cheongchi swatted Su Xiaolan away. Su Xiaolan's blood churned, and her features paled slightly as she borrowed the momentum of the attack to quickly fly backward. She was a little tired after a period of intense exercise. Cheongchi was just about to give chase when over 100 demonic blood beasts roared and pounced toward it, each of which possessed power comparable to that of a soul beast. Cheongchi, despair! This was true despair. Cheongchi didn't have any energy left to unleash its demonic roar of the sin again. It knew that if things continued like this, it would be the one to lose. Howl! You be *starred couple. Just you wait. Cheongchi roared, spread its wings, and soared into the sky, flying toward the giant mushroom building behind it. At this moment, it actually chose to escape. It had no choice. It couldn't beat them, so it could only run. This was a huge humiliation for one of the 4 great beasts of the beast cesspool. It was going to make those 2 humans pay 100-fold for this humiliation. Chapter 8:11. Lust suddenly chose to flee, but Enlin and Su Xiaolan were already prepared for this. And Lin's eyes widened. Want you to poop technique. Lust suddenly felt a sharp pain in its abdomen as a terrifying physiological reaction swept through its entire body. PFFF. A peculiar liquid erupted from its bottom. Lust's fleeing body faltered as pain, confusion, humiliation, countless emotions surged through its heart. It then thought back to all types of tragic and tragic events, and a sense of grief welled up in its heart as tears flowed from its eyes. Damn it! What a F** king mushroom! Lust wept as it fled. Due to these two spells, its escape was slowed down significantly. At that moment, the lightning chains, which were so solid that they were almost solid, pierced through the void and wrapped around Cheongchi's legs at an extremely fast speed. True Dragon, Lightning Bind. Su Xiaolan unleashed the power of the true dragon within her body, and the extremely powerful binding force hampered Lust's flight once again. The terrifying power of lightning spread along the chains to ravage Lust's entire body. Howl! Lust roared with rage as dark beams of death shot forth from the eye sockets of the skulls hanging from its wings before crashing into the chains of lightning. Not only were these dark beams extremely powerful, but they were also imbued with extremely potent corrosive power, and the chains were quickly corroded. However, Lust didn't even have a chance to flee before Enlin charged toward it with his evil-slaying sword in hand. There were also over 100 demonic blood beasts behind him. Lust's heart felt as if it had been plunged into a glacial cavern. This terrifying combination and uncanny power made escape an extravagant hope for it. It was filled with hatred. Just as Lust thought that it had no way out, a burst of energy suddenly erupted from within the mushroom building. Ah! The groundhog's blood-curdling wail erupted. A figure crashed through a wall and quickly fled into the distance. And Lin turned to discover that it was the golden groundhog that was running away. Blood flowed like crimson thorns toward the groundhog with a cold, bloodthirsty light. The groundhog's entire body was riddled with wounds, and golden blood was gushing forth from its body. The vines of the groundhog had the ability to absorb blood, and all of the blood that was gushing forth was absorbed by the vines. Through the broken wall, and Lin saw the traces of the other two soul beasts at the peak of the soul formation stage, but they had already turned into bones. Strange. Why can't I sense the source of the power? Could it be that the existence inside is far more powerful than me? In that instant, an urge to retreat welled up in Enlin's heart. If the enemy was too powerful, there was no need for him to take such a risk and insist on obtaining the Qilin Blood Jade. However, if even he couldn't obtain the Qilin Blood Jade, how could any of these beast race powerhouses from the outside have the strength to do so? And Lin and Su Xiaolan hesitated. Cheongchi was overjoyed and shouted, "Kaiser Blood, save me!" The golden groundhog also flew toward Lin and the others. The vines of the groundhog were extremely fast, and it was about to stab into its backside. It let loose an instinctive roar. Ah, save me! And Lin, save me? Who the hell would save it? It was already very benevolent of the Buddha not to stab it in the back. It was also at this moment that the demonic blood beasts behind Enlin were suddenly reduced to a puddle of blood. In that instant, Cheongchi felt a certain power return. The divine plunder technique had failed. Cheongchi seemed to have sensed this, and it was just about to try and sense that power again when Enlin appeared before it. The golden eye symbol appeared on his forehead, and golden ripples proliferated outward. Cheongchi felt as if it had lost that power again. Hell, so you really were the one who stole my power. It roared with rage as an inky black light burst forth from its claws, and it pounced toward Enlin. Enlin positioned his sword in front of him to defend himself against Cheongchi's attack. The golden eye symbol on his forehead appeared again, and golden ripples proliferated outward again. Cheongchi felt as if its entire body had been completely emptied, and Lin had used the divine plunder technique twice in a row. The divine plunder technique was a spell technique that was extremely taxing on the user's consciousness. In the past, he had only been able to use it once, but his consciousness was extremely powerful now, so he could use it once or twice more. The limit set by the system was that it could only contain 3 types of power at once. so Lin could still use the divine plunder technique one more time. However, Cheong-chi clearly wasn't going to give Lin that opportunity. Its claws were imbued with immense power, and it instantly sent Lin flying. At this moment, the groundhog had already flown into the area where Lin and Cheong-chi were battling. It didn't really want to ask for help from Lin and the others. It only wanted to get closer to Lin and see if Lin could attract the attention of the bloodvines. Boom! At this moment, a massive flaming sword projection hurtled through the air. The groundhog was dumbstruck upon seeing this terrifying sword projection. Was this a sword technique unleashed by a soul formation stage cultivator? It felt like it was even more powerful than the groundhog's. Cheong-chi was being attacked by a man and a woman again, and it hurriedly tried to defend against the flaming sword projection, but its body was still torn apart by the sword projection. The groundhog nearby was struck by the flaming sword projection for some reason, and it was also charred to a crisp. White smoke billowed from its mouth as it roared toward Lin with no regard for its own safety. F*CK off! What the F*CK are you doing here? And Lin borrowed the momentum from the groundhog to retreat, and he couldn't help but yell in shock and rage at the sight of the groundhog flying toward him, as well as the bloodvines trying to puncture its asteriscus. I just happened to be passing by. The golden groundhog refused to admit defeat as it flew through the air like a streak of golden light without any hesitation. The crimson vines behind it had already transformed into a crimson python that was moving like a living creature with countless sharp spikes protruding from its tip, giving onlookers a sense of disgust and disgust. It was already extremely close to the groundhog, and they were most likely going to come into contact very soon. And Lin silently pulled out his frying pan at the sight of the oncoming groundhog. The groundhog was a little dumbstruck upon seeing this, and a sense of foreboding welled up in its heart. Seeing as you want to come over, then I won't hold back. And Lin chuckled. Sea of Divine Flames, activate. Boom! Heavenly Void Flame, Setting Moon Flame, Great Holy Flame, and Demonic Star Flame all appeared at once, incinerating heaven and earth and transforming it into a purgatory of divine flames. F*CK was fire again. The groundhog was on the verge of tears upon seeing this. Why did these two humans like to play with fire so much? Weren't they purposely trying to antagonize it? Could it be that it was going to become a barbecued groundhog in the end? The groundhog and the bloodvines fell into the range of the divine flames almost instantaneously, and Lin's divine flames had undergone several transformations and enhancements, and they were already beginning to display the power of holy flames. The combination of the 4 divine flames was no less powerful than a holy flame. The golden groundhog howled in agony within the divine flames as it slashed its sabers through the air to create a domain to keep the divine flames at bay. The bloodvines were also affected, and they faltered slightly before splitting into 2, one of which continued to stab toward the groundhog while the other stabbed toward Lin, who was unleashing his divine flames. Chapter 812. A blood-curdling roar erupted from the groundhog's mouth. Golden blood gushed forth from its asteriscus. Its defenses had clearly been broken by the thorny vines, and had been subjected to an extremely brutal attack. Another crimson thorn flew toward Lin with an extremely fearsome glint in its eyes, and he could smell the pungent odor of blood even from afar. And Lin had wanted to face the power unleashed by the massive mushroom building head-on a long time ago. He held the high-rank immortal tool, Divine Flame bead, in his hand, and a golden flaming dragon leaped out from within. It was like a fish in water within the sea of divine flames, and its power was further enhanced. Its dragon scales had almost materialized, and it roared as it pounced toward the crimson, thorny vine. Boom! The two clashed, sending terrifying shockwaves of energy surging forth. Even the sea of divine flames was warped slightly as a result, and the crimson thorny vine twisted and contorted violently before quickly evaporating under the terrifyingly high temperatures. The sea of divine flames also slowly dissipated at this moment. This technique expended far too much energy, so Enlin didn't dare to use it for too long. He swallowed an energy replenishing spirit pill before turning to the golden groundhog again. The golden groundhog wielded a pair of snowy white sabers and slashed at the crimson thorny vine in a frenzy, as if it were going to fight to the death. Its A*S that had been ravaged flew through the air as blood gushed forth from its body. Under certain circumstances, beasts would also go berserk if their bottom line was violated, and this was clearly the case for the golden groundhog. The crimson thorny vine was being forcibly split apart, and it was also being scorched by the sea of divine flames, so the golden groundhog was able to temporarily gain the upper hand. I, the peerless saber demon, have never suffered such humiliation. Ah! Die! 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 Single strike of the ocean. The golden groundhog roared as it unleashed an extremely dazzling saber projection with its snowy white saber. The saber projection tore through the crimson thorny vine with an unstoppable force before completely vanquishing it in midair. Huff, huff, huff! The groundhog panted heavily as a faint smile appeared on its face. A sense of satisfaction from successfully exacting its revenge welled up in its entire body. However, it had only just raised its head when it was greeted by the sight of a man standing before it with a chilling smile on his face. The golden groundhog. It felt as if it had fallen into the mouth of a tiger. Was this the punishment for being impulsive? And Lin wielded his evil-slaying sword and was just about to slay this person. However, before he could do so, he turned toward Su Xiaolan, and his expression abruptly shifted as he unleashed his wings of wind and wind sword at the same time. Bang! And Lin's figure suddenly disappeared from the groundhog's field of vision, and only the gale-force winds whipped up by his rapid flight were still howling through the air. The golden groundhog faltered momentarily before turning to look behind it. While Su Xiaolan was bullying Qiongqi, a distorted shadow appeared at the broken wall and opened its blood-red eyes. Buzz, invisible waves spread out, and strange sounds began to appear in the world. In that instant, Su Xiaolan's clear eyes became blurry, and her expression became absent-minded. What a great opportunity! Qiongqi's eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty light as it slashed its claws toward the woman in front of it without any hesitation. Scram! An angry roar rang out. Boom! An inky black circle appeared beneath Qiongqi's feet, and a terrifying gravitational force exerted upon Qiongqi's body, causing its bones to crack and crack. Abyssal gravity was instantly activated, and Lin charged toward Qiongqi with black mist emanating from his body, and his aura had reached an extremely terrifying level. He opened his mouth toward Qiongqi. Roar! Qiongqi's expression shifted drastically as this was its signature divine ability, the roar of the sinful demon. A voice imbued with boundless sin transformed into a substantial power that swept toward it. Arrogance was like frost, sloth was like a dream, envy was like a saber, rage was like fire, greed was like mist, gluttony was like a maw, and lust was like a demon. The power of the 7 sins instantly erupted, sweeping through every inch of Qiongqi's body. Howl! This was the first time Qiongqi had been attacked by its own power and held with pain. The power of sin was so terrifying, but it was also so wonderful. The black shadow on the mushroom building pointed a finger at Enlin. Space twisted, and the crimson arrow fell toward Enlin with boundless, terrifying power. Even with his ultra-powerful divine body, Enlin was still struck by a sense of extreme peril in that instant. He also pointed a finger at the crimson arrow, and a sea of blood surged as the power of death formed a circular shield in front of him. This was also Qiongqi's signature power, the power of demonic blood dead souls. Boom! Energy exploded, and the arrow pierced through the circular shield in the end. Just when Qiongqi thought that Enlin was going to use his power to defend himself, and Lin gave up on his defense, and golden void lightning revolved around his sword as he slashed it down upon Cheong-chi. How? Have you gone insane? You're going to take me with you even if you die. Cheong-chi roared in a frenzy. In its eyes, and Lin was essentially trading a life for a life. However, and Lin knew that his body of the war god would be able to defend against the weakened crimson arrow. Cheong-chi was already riddled with wounds, and it frantically tried to defend itself against the earth-shattering sword strike unleashed by Enlin. At this moment, the crimson arrow had already pierced Enlin's heart. The golden void lightning was returned to void stage divine lightning, and it was imbued with the power of annihilation, so it was able to easily break through Cheong-chi's defenses. Cheong-chi stared at Enlin, wanting to see Enlin's heart being punctured by the crimson arrow. That way he would be able to die in peace. However, the scene that unfolded before his eyes was one of absolute despair. The arrow struck Enlin's chest, and a sharp screeching sound erupted as it was unable to advance any further. A rainbow light erupted from the spot where Enlin's chest had been punctured, and it seemed to have formed the most indestructible shield to keep the arrow at bay. It didn't pierce through? Cheong-chi's eyes widened. At this moment, the boundless golden void lightning had already sliced open his body. No, this isn't fair. Cheong-chi howled in despair. Why are you unscathed? I refuse to accept this. They had agreed to die together, but only he had to keep his promise. Cheong-chi roared at Enlin with extreme despair and rage, only to receive an answer that made him even more desperate. Why? Because I'm more powerful than you. And Lin replied in an indifferent voice. Cheong-chi. His voice had only just fallen when Cheong-chi's body was pulverized by the golden void lightning. The crimson arrow also dissipated into thin air, and aside from a slightly red wound on Enlin's chest, there were no other wounds. The black shadow on the mushroom building let out a soft "ha." It was obvious that he was also a little surprised. However, Gluttony's expression shifted drastically as he battled Gundam 3 on the other side. Even Cheong-chi had been slain. How could he not feel a sense of crisis? Gluttony was very confident in Kaiser Blood's power, but Kaiser Blood might not be in the mood to save him. Wasn't Cheong-chi's death the best proof of that? Gluttony didn't hesitate at all, and he immediately flew toward the mushroom building after finding a gap in the battle. It couldn't be helped. The power of these two humans had far exceeded his expectations. And Lin turned to look at the black shadow in the distance, but he couldn't see its features clearly. Its stature seemed to be similar to that of a normal human. That was where his heart was palpitating. Coincidentally, the black shadow was also sizing him up, so it looked like he wouldn't be able to escape. Thankfully, the plunder effect of the divine plunder technique didn't disappear after Cheong-chi's death. He could still use the power of the divine plunder technique for a few more minutes. And Lin waved a hand, and several dozen demonic blood beasts materialized on the ground before pouncing toward the black shadow. You're going to use the power of the demonic blood dead souls against me? The black shadow looked at Enlin and spoke in a raspy voice. So be it, I'll show you what true life is. Chapter 813. The black shadow's voice was raspy, but it was imbued with a sense of superiority and disdain. He pointed a finger at the demonic blood beasts formed from blood that were charging toward him. God's blessing, all demons in this world belong to me. As his voice trailed off, a red ripple proliferated from his fingertip throughout heaven and earth. All of the demonic blood beasts materialized by Enlin faltered, as if they had been frozen in midair. In that instant, Enlin felt as if his power had been restricted, and he had completely lost control over the demonic blood beasts. The power of the several dozen demonic blood beasts climbed once again, and they all turned to look at Enlin with sinister smiles on their faces. Do you see that? Grant them power, intelligence, and thought processes. This is the true power of life. How about it? The black shadow's eyes were crimson as he stared at Enlin. and Lin's lips twitched slightly. What was that mysterious being trying to say? Was he implying that he should come and praise him? Asking Lin to praise his enemy? What a joke! He was the invincible sword immortal Lin, the tamer of divine lightning, who didn't even fear divine lightning. How could he praise an enemy? As expected of a mighty figure that understands life. Your power is amazing. And Lin joined his hands in a salute. The Black Shadow's expression faltered slightly. Senior, I was trying to avoid the inversion phenomenon and accidentally barged into this place, so I'm really sorry. If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave, and Lin continued. The Black Shadow, Su Xiaolan, Gluttony, who had just fled to the Black Shadow's side, was also a little dumbstruck. His display of weakness had come too quickly, like a tornado. The Black Shadow was still waiting for Lin to say some defiant words. Then he would personally beat these people into submission before capturing them back to the sect. However, Lin didn't play by the rules. He immediately praised him for being bad ****, and said that he was the best before taking his leave. Su Xiaolan quickly understood Lin's intentions, and she began to retreat in a stealthy manner. And Lin actually didn't want to be such a coward. However, he had just silently compared their strengths, and he wasn't confident that he could defeat just the several dozen demonic blood beasts that had been strengthened by the Black Shadow. Then, how was he supposed to fight these demonic blood beasts who could control those demonic blood beasts with ease? He had just used his divine sense to sense the aura of a wave of black shadows, but he discovered that with his divine sense he was actually unable to perceive the power of the black shadows, which was very frightening. An enemy whose exact strength was unknown, but who was very powerful, was always a cause for fear. The enemy forces consisted of a terrifyingly powerful enemy with an unknown cultivation base and a gluttony at the pinnacle of the return to void initial stage. On their side, there were 2 soul formation stage cultivators, 1 Gundam 3, and 2 beasts who only knew how to yell 666. The third party was a half-cooked groundhog. How were they supposed to fight this battle? It was obvious that Lin and his team had no chance of winning. Taking such a risk for a Qilin Bloodjade was simply not worth it, and Lin and Su Xiaolan slowly retreated, keeping a wary eye on the Black Shadow's movements. The Black Shadow came to its senses and suddenly asked, "Are you trying to run away?" And Lin shook his head. "This is a cultivator's business, so how can you say I'm running away? We don't have any vendetta against each other. I'm just here to take a look around before leaving. Not only did you kill my demonic blood beasts, but you also killed my pet Lust. You call that no vendetta?" The Black Shadow spoke in an indifferent voice, and Lin was rendered speechless, but he continued to retreat. As for Aonyo, the frog, and the groundhog, they naturally ran even faster. Even Lin and Su Xiaolan had run away, so what were they supposed to do? Were they supposed to wait to be turned into high-level food ingredients? Su Xiaolan immediately offered an explanation upon seeing that the Black Shadow seemed to be preparing to attack. "We were just defending ourselves. The Beast Tribe guards and Lust wanted to kill us, so we could only retaliate. We couldn't just stand there and let ourselves be beaten, right? Then we accidentally killed them." Defending ourselves? The Black Shadow blinked. That makes sense. Bah! Blood Lord, why are you wasting your breath on them? Hurry up and eat them. Gluttony immediately tried to dissuade Lin and Su Xiaolan from running away, but the Black Shadow remained unmoved. "What's the rush? This is my home. Without my orders, they won't be able to escape. I'm a reasonable person. Hurry up and tell me, how can I refute them?" The Black Shadow's voice became less weary as it spoke with a vexed expression. Gluttony was a little dumbstruck by this question. Normally, it would just eat anything it didn't like. It didn't need to reason with others. Why would it need teeth if it was reasonable for everything? If it couldn't win a verbal argument, it could just open its mouth and eat. Actually, we don't need to be reasonable. Gluttony thought for a moment before voicing its thoughts. Only the weak are reasonable. They can only use reason as a weapon. The strong can do whatever they want. No one can stop them anyway, so they can do whatever they want. The Black Shadow paused momentarily. But we can't be so righteous if we do that. Gluttony harumphed disapprovingly. The bigger the fist, the harder the reason. The Black Shadow thought for a moment before replying. The bigger the fist, the harder the reason? That sounds a little barbaric. I want to be a cultured person. Blood Lord, you're not a person. Gluttony corrected. Sigh. The Black Shadow heaved a forlorn sigh. Its voice was clearly very weak, but it was like the lamenting of the heavens. And Lin and Su Xiaolan, as well as all the beasts, also heard that lamenting sigh. Before they had a chance to react, the blood on the vast land of blood began to radiate with dazzling light. The blood is boiling, the Black Shadow said in a slow voice. Boom! It was as if the power of an entire continent crashed down upon them at the same time, and the power of the blood in the entire continent became restless, as if it were sucking at their bodies like a demon. Moo! My body! Moo! Ao Neo roared with shock and horror. Ribbit! I want to go home. Let me go home. Ribbit! The divine poison frog's feet were bound by the blood on the ground, and it struggled with all its might, but it was unable to break free. And Lin and Su Xiaolan were also unable to escape. The power of the vast land of blood had already fused into one, and the binding power unleashed by it was indescribably terrifying. The Black Shadow stepped forward and appeared before Lin and Su Xiaolan. The darkness enshrouding its body slowly dissipated, revealing the true appearance of the Black Shadow. It wore a set of plain white robes, and its skin was as fair as snow. There was a warm smile on its face, and it joined its hands in a polite salute. My apologies. Please allow me to be unreasonable just this once. There's something I need you to do, and I can't wait any longer. He looked quite handsome and likable, but the prerequisite was to ignore the Qilin horns on his head and his crimson eyes. Kirin Horn? Could it be that you're... And Lin's eyes widened. That's right. I am the demonic blood Kirin, the middle-aged man replied with a smile. Chapter 814. This middle-aged man was the demonic blood Kirin, and Lin, Su Xiaolan, Aonyo, the frog, and the groundhog were all dumbstruck upon hearing this. The groundhog clicked its front teeth in shock and horror. Didn't the demonic blood Kirin die? Did he come back to life? The middle-aged man looked at the groundhog with a meaningful smile. Who told you I died? Just because other people think I'm dead doesn't mean I'm dead. Then the Kirin blood jade. And Lin couldn't help but ask, Kirin blood jade does indeed appear after the death of a Dao integration stage Kirin. That is the manifestation of the essence of the Kirin's Dao realm and power. The middle-aged man turned toward Lin. You're struggling to even protect yourself, and you're still thinking about the Kirin blood jade? And Lin's lips twitched. He just didn't want to face the cruel reality that he was fighting like a stupid C** and T for a Kirin blood jade that didn't even exist. Gluttony made his way over to the middle-aged man and drooled as he stared intently at the groundhog. It smells so good. Blood Lord, can I eat it? The groundhog was dumbstruck by this question. It had been roasted by Su Xiaolan's holy flame and then by Lin's sea of divine flames, so its body did indeed have a peculiar roasted aroma. In the blood-binding formation, being stared at by the super-gluttonous Taotai, he was undoubtedly in despair. He had even imagined the cruel scene of himself being bitten and swallowed into his stomach. And Lin wrinkled his nose. He could also smell the unique, roasted aroma of the golden groundhog, and some of its body parts had even been cooked to a medium extent. As a professional foodie who had eaten all types of groundhogs, he could tell that this groundhog's flavor was definitely top-notch. Of course, and Lin wasn't interested in it. He was just thinking about it. The golden groundhog was in complete despair, but the middle-aged man's words reignited its hope. This groundhog looks like it has quite a lot of aptitude. My lust is dead, and it'll take some time to revive him. So I'll let this groundhog take his place for now," the middle-aged man said. The groundhog was almost moved to tears upon hearing this. This demonic blood Kirin really had good taste. He knew that it was talented and had value, although being praised and favored by the enemy was not something worth bragging about. Thinking that this way he could avoid being slowly bitten by Tautai as food, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Let's get back to the main topic. I need you guys to help me with something. Only you guys can do it. If you succeed, I can promise to let you go, and I will let bygones be bygones," the middle-aged man said with a smile. "What do you want us to help you with?" And Lin asked cautiously, "Help me open the passage between the two worlds." "I want to go out," the uncle said. "The passageway between the two worlds." Su Xiaolan was puzzled. "Isn't the passageway between the two worlds in the direction of Huangxing? Why are you looking for us?" "Humph, they're both special stars, but there's an exit in the direction of the yellow star." "Don't tell me my red star doesn't have an exit?" The uncle snorted. "Su Xiaolan." And Lin opened his mouth to retort, but he finally refrained from doing so. From the looks of it, the middle-aged man seemed to have been triggered. What was there to argue about? Why did he have to put on an expression as if he had to have something as well? "Why do you only know that there's an exit in the direction of the yellow star, but not here?" "That's because all of the beasts that have come here have died." The middle-aged man raised his head with a smug expression on his face, and Lin and Su Xiaolan didn't dare to say anything. "Didn't you say you were going to be a reasonable and cultured person? How many beasts have died at your hands?" "To tell you the truth, I can't escape from the vast land of blood, which is this floating continent in the sky. I'll be killed by Panga's gaze if I go outside." The middle-aged man heaved a forlorn sigh. "Hence, I can only leave through the passageway between this continent and the vast land of blood." "Pangu? The Pangu who created the Tai Chu continent?" And Lin's eyes widened with astonishment. "That's right. That F** king be * starred." The middle-aged man looked up into the sky with a resentful expression, and Lin and Su Xiaolan were both astonished. So those eyes were Panga's eyes? My God, that was the #1 legend on the Tai Chu continent. Who would have thought that he would appear here? Don't be too surprised. That's only the power of laws, left behind by Pangu. He left this place a long time ago and has gone to a very faraway place. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a chance to regain my freedom. The middle-aged man waved a hand as if he didn't want to talk about that anymore. "I also have a passageway between the two worlds here, but it can't accommodate beings of my cultivation base. Hence, I need your help to widen that passageway again and break through all of the restrictions. Are you sure we can do something that even you can't?" And Lin was a little perplexed. No matter how much this middle-aged man's power had been weakened, he was still more powerful than them, right? "My pets, and I can't even get close to that passageway. As for the beasts that came to provide reinforcements, they're all trash. None of them can withstand the power of ice at the core of the passageway, and all of them froze to death along the way," the middle-aged man said with a disappointed expression. Gasp! Everyone drew a collective sharp intake of breath upon hearing this, and Lin and Su Xiaolan felt like they had fallen into a trap. The groundhog's lips twitched uncontrollably. Beasts that came to provide reinforcements. Did this middle-aged man have some kind of misunderstanding regarding the word reinforcements? They were clearly here to steal the Kirin blood jade, only to be used as cannon fodder. Thankfully, the heavens have eyes and allowed me to meet you too. Your cultivation bases allowed me to enter, and you're the most powerful beings of the same cultivation base that I've ever seen in my life. You're my lucky stars. The middle-aged man clapped his hands and praised as he turned to Enlin and Su Xiaolan with a gratified expression. If you had come any later, the passageway would have closed, and I wouldn't have been able to get out. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, and the three beasts were all dumbstruck upon hearing this. The passageway is going to close? Didn't they say that the passageway was going to open up and that this world was going to descend into the sinister spirit beast cesspool? The golden groundhog was dumbstruck. Ha 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 ha! The middle-aged man couldn't help but chortle with mirth as he turned to the groundhog with a loving expression. Do you believe everything that outsiders say? You're so adorably silly. I like it. The groundhog, Pangu has been gone for too long, and this world has indeed become unstable. Even the passageway between the two worlds has been opened. The power of blood has even seeped into the outside world, affecting the living beings there. But this is already the limit. The self-repair mechanism of this small world has already been activated, and I don't have much time left, the middle-aged man said. He waved a hand through the air, and spatial power surged. After a rush of dizziness, everyone appeared within the mushroom building. The restrictive power disappeared, and they regained their freedom. However, none of them dared to move, and all of them looked up with shock and bewilderment on their faces. There was a piece of blood jade that was glowing with a warm light. Chapter 8:15. The light emanating from the crimson jade was drawn toward a certain black spell formation, which directed its power toward the roof of the building before releasing it outward. And Lin felt like the crimson light that had lit up the entire continent had most likely come from this crimson jade. He could feel the origin from it, and he could feel the vast and endless power. The golden groundhog had also seen it before, but it had almost been completely wiped out before it even had a chance to attack. At this moment, it was standing obediently on the ground, repressing its urge to snatch the crimson jade for itself. As for the frog and Aonyo, they didn't even dare to say anything. They were the only two beast tribes that hadn't been assigned to them by the middle-aged man. All of the other beasts had been assigned missions, but they hadn't been assigned anything yet. In the face of such a temperamental mighty figure, they didn't dare to make a name for themselves anymore. All they had to do was ignore bystanders like them. Do you all think this is the Kirin blood jade? The middle-aged man asked with a smile. Everyone fell silent. The middle-aged man waved a hand, and the crimson jade tremored lightly before flying into his palm, where it hovered in the air and glowed with a warm red light, as if it were the most perfect piece of jade in this world. The dazzling red light at the top of the mushroom building suddenly disappeared, and the entire floating continent dimmed down. Amidst the resplendent starry sky, the guiding star suddenly disappeared. That's right, this is the Kirin blood jade, the middle-aged man confirmed. Gasp! Everyone drew a sharp intake of breath as they stared at the crimson jade in the middle-aged man's palm with scorching light in their eyes. The Kirin blood jade was the crystallization of the mythological beast, the Kirin's Tao intent and power. This was a treasure that even Tao integration stage super mighty figures yearned for. Senior, didn't you say that the Kirin blood jade was only born after the Kirin died? Then why did you? And Lin couldn't help but ask as he looked at the middle-aged man beside him. That's because I died. The middle-aged man's expression remained unchanged as he looked around at everyone. Then I came back to life. And Lin, it's just that life forms like mine are very dependent. The middle-aged man stroked the crimson jade in his hand as he said in a slow voice, I'm not afraid to tell you that I came back to life through some kind of mystic technique. But I still have to rely on this crimson jade to survive. The blood jade was about the size of a goose egg. It was round and flawless, emitting an alluring luster. Will, spirituality, and energy were all very abundant. It was like the most perfect gemstone. A hint of pride appeared on the middle-aged man's face when he saw the excitement and envy in everyone's eyes. From a certain perspective, this Qilin blood jade can be said to be my true form. What do you think? The blood jade that I condensed after my death is beautiful, right? Everyone. And Lin felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Speaking of which, did this uncle have to be so excited to show everyone the crystallization of his death? The middle-aged demonic blood Kirin seemed to be entranced by the beauty of his blood jade, and an intoxicated expression appeared on his face. The more powerful the Kirin, the more perfect their blood jade will be after they die. This blood jade is the most perfect blood jade I've ever seen in my life. Everyone, awesome. The frog finally found a chance to flatter Lin Fan. The uncle ignored it, and his gaze gradually became sharp. Phoenixes can be reborn after they perish, and Qilins can be passed on after they perish. Countless beings are coveting my blood jade. However, do they have the right to obtain this blood jade? He raised his head and looked around at everyone. They don't have the right. There is no being in this world that is worthy of possessing such a perfect blood jade. The middle-aged man waved a hand, and the Kirin blood jade flew toward the golden groundhog. The mythological beast emanating from the blood jade instantly made the golden groundhog's face turn pale with fright, and it almost stumbled over its feet. You possess the inheritance of the mythological beast saber true intent, as well as the myriad beast holy soul, but you don't have the right. He waved a hand again, and the blood jade flew toward Su Xiaolan. Red ripples proliferated forth, making everyone feel as if they were facing an invincible mythological beast. Su Xiaolan's body trembled slightly, and she took a step back. You possess the bloodline of the true dragon and the bloodline of the holy beast vermilion bird. Your sword Dao aptitude and cultivation aptitude are both top-notch, but you still don't have the right. He waved his hands again, and the blood jade flew toward Lin. In that instant, Lin felt as if he were looking at a mythological beast that had slaughtered an entire continent before baring its fangs and exuding a suffocating and despairing aura. The demonic blood Kirin's aura swept forth, and in Lin's heart skipped a beat in that instant as a sense of instinctive fear welled up in his heart. Attaining top-notch sword Dao true intent at the soul formation intermediate stage and forging an extremely powerful divine body. Your aptitude is astonishing, but you don't have the right. The middle-aged man raised his head with a haughty expression. No prodigy or powerful being in this world is worthy of such a perfect blood jade. The blood jade will not acknowledge them, so they are delusional if they think they can absorb the power of the blood jade. In this world, the only one worthy of this blood jade is myself. The middle-aged man spoke with a heroic expression. Everyone's expression darkened upon hearing this. F***CK. Was he just trying to brag about himself after saying so much? Only someone as perfect as himself was worthy of his little GG. The middle-aged man was very pleased with himself. He was already very displeased that a bunch of rabble dared to covet his blood jade. Now that there were a few geniuses that caught his eye, he might as well say a few more words. He wanted to show them what true strength and pride were. However, something unexpected happened that caught him off guard. It was a sudden retching sound. And Lin, the middle-aged man's face convulsed slightly. Was this a provocation? This had to be a provocation, right? This was a provocation to express his disdain for his previous words. Even Su Xiaolan was given a fright by Lin's sudden action. All right, you want to throw up now? The middle-aged man was just about to flare up when Lin retched again. And Lin, This time, a golden baby with a white cape on its back was suddenly thrown up from his mouth. The middle-aged man's pupils contracted upon seeing this. The frog, groundhog, and Aonyo all gaped open their mouths. Before they had a chance to do anything, the golden baby opened his mouth and swallowed the Kirin blood jade before him. Gulp! The golden baby swallowed the Kirin blood jade and rubbed its stomach with a wistful expression. Burp! The scene fell into a strange silence. Not only were the beasts completely dumbstruck, but even Su Xiaolan and Lin were also staring blankly at the golden baby. This was the Kirin that had not appeared for a long time. The middle-aged man's lips trembled, and his calm and proud expression was nowhere to be seen. His voice trembled as he spoke. Where's my blood jade? Chapter 816. Where did the middle-aged man's blood jade go? This was actually a useless question. It was quite clear that it had been swallowed by Kirin. However, the middle-aged man was completely unable to accept this. How could the blood jade have been swallowed? How could it have been swallowed? Whoosh! The middle-aged man flashed toward Kirin before grabbing him by his feet and shaking him from head to toe. Spit it out. Spit it out right now. Yeah. And Kirin struggled relentlessly, but he showed no signs of vomiting. Don't blame me for being ruthless. The middle-aged man was clearly already at his limit, and he raised a hand to slap Kirin's face. Just how powerful was his furious slap? The power of his palm made the entire space around him tremble and warp. Bam! And Kirin exploded from the slap. Countless bolts of lightning flew through the air before completely disappearing. That's right, the Kirin blood jade also disappeared this time. Ah! The middle-aged man clawed at his face with both hands and howled like a groundhog. Where did my blood jade go? Why did it disappear? Ah! The middle-aged man stood rooted to the spot with a broken expression before turning toward Lin with a ferocious expression as he made his way toward him. What did you do? The Kirin blood jade is perfect and noble. There's no way it could be absorbed by a life form like you. Tell me, where did you hide it? If you don't want to die— He didn't even get a chance to finish a sentence before lightning converged in the air to reveal Kirin again. The middle-aged man faltered slightly before flashing toward Kirin and unleashing a spatial seal without any hesitation. He then grabbed onto the golden baby with a death grip in fear that it would disappear again. Kirin gagged as a pained expression appeared on his face, as if he had eaten something bad. The middle-aged man was ecstatic upon seeing this, and he patted Kirin's back relentlessly. Your stomach is hurting, right? Hurry up and spit it out. Ah, hurry up and spit it out. Kirin howled as lightning crackled around his body. A red dot suddenly appeared on his left chest, upon which the fearsome power of a mythological beast began to proliferate. Thump, and Lin's heart thumped. Then his blood also began to churn. A boundless red light burst forth from Kirin's heart. The red light was imbued with the paramount power of slaughter and life, and it was as if a mythological beast had descended from the heavens. This was the Tao intent and power of the demonic blood Kirin. The middle-aged man's eyes and mouth were wide open as he stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief, unable to wrap his head around it. Wasn't this his power? Why did the tiny golden person know how to use it? Kirin's white cape fluttered behind him, and countless specks of red light suddenly revolved around his naked body before converging to form an extremely vibrant red t-shirt and shorts. The middle-aged man stared at Kirin. He could sense the exact same power as the Kirin blood jade emanating from Kirin's t-shirt and shorts. A very bizarre conjecture appeared in his mind. The middle-aged man's breathing quickened, and he exclaimed in disbelief, Did my Qilin blood jade become a costume? And Lin, Su Xiaolan, all the beasts. Would anyone believe him if he told them about this? No. How is this possible? The middle-aged man was no longer as graceful as before, and he clawed at his face with a deranged expression. How could my Kirin blood jade become something like this? He began to tear at Kirin's clothes as he spoke. Take it off. Take it off right now. Even if it's just a costume, it's my blood jade. However, it was as if the clothes had fused together within Kirin, and no matter how hard the middle-aged man tried, he was unable to take Kirin's clothes off. The middle-aged man continued to tear at Kirin's clothes, and Kirin continued to resist and cry. This was not a scene suitable for children. Oi, you've gone too far. He's just a child. Su Xiaolan couldn't bear to watch this any longer, and she scolded. None of your business. The middle-aged man glowered at Lin as killing intent swept forth like a tidal wave, and Lin instantly positioned himself in front of Su Xiaolan. Let go of Kirin. He's mine. I'm going to kill all of you if I don't get my Kirin blood jade today. The middle-aged man glared at Enlin and Su Xiaolan with crimson eyes before turning to Enkiran again. He lifted Enkiran up into the air, and Enkiran unleashed a barrage of golden void lightning to defend himself. The lightning tore through the air before striking his body, only to be dispelled by his extremely powerful, protective true essence. This was not enough to hurt him. I'm not dead, which means that the Kirin blood jade hasn't disappeared. I can sense that the Kirin blood jade is most likely that piece of clothing. Give it back to me. The middle-aged man used his hand as a saber to forcibly tear Enkiran's clothes apart. However, a certain connection suddenly appeared in his body, preventing him from doing so. This was an instinctive refusal to hurt himself. You can't hurt yourself. I'm the demonic blood Kirin. The middle-aged man roared with rage as he tried to strike Enkiran with his hand again. Whoosh! A gust of wind swept through the air, and the saber hand stopped an inch in front of Enkiran's body, trembling uncontrollably. Not only did he not dare to hurt Enkiran's clothes, but he also didn't dare to hurt Enkiran either. He could sense a master-slave relationship from Enkiran. Master and slave my A**S. Did I really become a piece of clothing? The middle-aged man roared with rage burning in his eyes as he turned to Enlin. If he couldn't hurt Enlin, then he would just have to kill him. Die. The middle-aged man instantly appeared before Enlin with monstrous killing intent emanating from his body, and the energy imbued within his fist was so viscous that even the space around him was beginning to congeal. However, for some reason, his fist was unable to descend upon Enlin again. This was because he could also sense some sort of master-slave relationship from Enlin. CK, your mother! The middle-aged man almost threw up a mouthful of blood. At this moment, Enlin's mountain-quaking fist had already landed, and the middle-aged man was instantly knocked flying. Gasp! Everyone drew a sharp intake of breath. The demonic blood Kirin had been knocked flying by Enlin. The middle-aged man crawled up from the ground with a dazed expression, as if he had lost his soul. This can't be real. All of the beasts were dumbstruck once again. Had the demonic blood Kirin been knocked stupid by Enlin's punch? The middle-aged man was actually starting to doubt his life. The Kirin blood jade was his. How did it become a piece of clothing for no reason? Not only that, but there was also king master-slave relationship. Have you ever heard of beast pet contracts? This was king beast pet contract in disguise. Impossible. This must be a dream. I'm definitely still dreaming. Tears flowed from the middle-aged man's eyes as he shook his head relentlessly. It's all fake. I'm a mighty Dao integration stage mythological beast. How could my relationship with Enlin be so vague? Chapter 817. All of the beast tribe powerful beings and Su Xiaolan could roughly guess what had happened from the scenes unfolding before them. Enlin also understood why the demonic blood Kirin was on the verge of breaking down. This was because he could also sense some sort of connection between him and the middle-aged man. Not only was the Kirin blood jade gone, but even their master and slave relationship had been confirmed. This was the most frustrating part. He was extremely angry and aggrieved, but he couldn't do anything about it. And Lin put himself in the Kirin blood jade's shoes. If he were to encounter the situation, he would also explode on the spot. That's right, he was a very humane person who understood how to put himself in the shoes of his enemies. And Kirin, who had just regained his freedom, pointed a shiny golden finger at the dispirited, middle-aged man. There was an indignant expression on his face as he babbled incessantly, as if he were lecturing an immature child. After saying that, it flew into Enlin's sea of vital energy. Ding dong! Congratulations, host, for completing the mission to progress to soul formation final stage. Condition: giving Kirin a nice set of clothes. And Lin shuddered as he turned to the system with shock and elation. How long had it been? He had finally broken through the bottleneck that he had been stuck at. Thank you, and Kirin. Thank you, demonic blood Kirin. Even he didn't think that he would be able to obtain in Kirin's clothes through the Kirin blood jade. And Lin didn't even know what to say anymore. This was fate. Kacha! A crisp crack sounded, and in Lin felt a certain power erupt from within his body. At the same time, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged for close to 5 kilometers, and Lin immediately summoned Gundam 3 before sitting down with his legs crossed. He was about to break through to Soul Formation final stage. He had waited for so long for this day. It took him a whole year to break through the bottleneck and step onto the path of leveling up again. He was a disgrace to the system. This is... Ao Nyo stared at Enlin with incredulity on its face. The divine poison frog could sense the surging vital energy around it converging toward Enlin's body in the form of a massive vortex. He's making a breakthrough, ribbit! He snatched the Kirin blood jade and pummeled the demonic blood Kirin, and then he's making a breakthrough? Is he that reckless? The golden groundhog stared at Enlin with astonishment on its face. Su Xiaolan smiled faintly. With a light tap of her toes, she landed lightly beside Enlin and joined the formation of guardians. The demonic blood Kirin couldn't hurt Enlin, so any beast tribe that wanted to approach Enlin would have to ask her sword first. The middle-aged man looked at Enlin, who was meditating and breaking through, and was in a daze again. Why is he breaking through again? Is this how the world bullies people? Is it because you absorbed my Qilin blood jade? No. If he really did absorb the Qilin blood jade, then I wouldn't be here anymore. Could it be that I really have established some kind of master-slave connection with this human male, and I exist as some kind of object or life form? He felt like he needed to calm down and think about this situation. There was actually nothing to think about. He just didn't want to accept it. His Qilin blood jade had become Enlin's clothes. No matter how hard he tried, he would only be elevated to the level of Enlin's woman at most. Brothers were like limbs and women were like clothes. Forcibly elevating his status. I feel so bad. How could this be? The middle-aged man felt like the world was playing a prank on him. Why did he have to encounter such a strange human male? Blood Lord, should I go and eat him? Gluttony glowered at Enlin with a ferocious expression. It was clearly planning to fight to the death. Don't. How can you hurt him? The middle-aged man immediately tried to stop it. Then his expression froze for a moment before he regained his senses. Why the hell would I think that I can't hurt this human male no matter what? The middle-aged man was in despair. He really was King screwed. And Lin's breakthrough had officially begun. As the shackles on his body were broken, a vast amount of vital energy flowed relentlessly into his body, refining his divine body and expanding his sea of vital energy. Even his consciousness was further enhanced. Roar! An earth-shattering roar erupted. A crimson Qilin materialized behind Enlin. The middle-aged man's mouth gaped open again. Isn't that me? Regardless of whether it was his aura or appearance, it was exactly the same as when he was alive. And now, the projection of the Qilin was looking down on him with a disdainful expression. The middle-aged man felt extremely depressed. Why was this tribulation transcendence experience so bad? The projection of the Qilin materialized by Enlin was not just for show. It was relentlessly imparting the true essence of the power of blood to Enlin. It was as if it wanted nothing more than to offer everything it had to Enlin. The middle-aged man almost threw up blood from rage upon seeing this. Why was it like this? This was clearly such a perfect blood jade, and only the perfect him deserved to possess it. However, this was his master, so it wasn't all that difficult to accept. Why was he referring to him as master? The middle-aged man's heart jolted with shock, and he fell into despair again after coming to his senses. Again and again, the stimulation made him feel like he had a heart attack. And Lin was still becoming more powerful, and even his divine body was improving slightly. Within his sea of vital energy, and Kirin had also become extremely active. After donning the demonic blood Kirin costume, he seemed to have become more confident, and he even dared to yell at the flaming vermilion bird in the sky. It looked like a battle was going to take place between them, and Lin was quite looking forward to their battle. Couldn't Kirin, who had been abused for so long, be able to turn the tables with a new set of clothes? The demonic blood Kirin's true intent in the Tao of blood allowed Lin to attain an extremely profound level of enlightenment. In particular, his observation of the Tao of life was making his evergreen technique show signs of loosening. No, not only was it loosening, a green divine halo suddenly appeared above Lin's head, and boundless life force energy erupted forth. Boom! An extremely terrifying energy fluctuation proliferated outward. The divine power of the green divine halo was elevated to another level. The middle-aged man stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before his eyes. Is this the power of life? What a profound and boundless power! Su Xiaolan pursed her lips at the sight of the green halo above Lin's head. This color really was very environmentally friendly and was filled with the harmony of life. After a short while, the vital energy vortex that encompassed a radius of close to 10 kilometers began to dissipate, and the Kirin projection also disappeared. Everything returned to normal, and Lin opened his bright eyes and stood up. The aura exuding from his body was extremely vast and profound, as if he were a primordial beast that had just awakened, exerting immense pressure upon the surrounding space. Soon his aura was withdrawn again, and everything returned to normal, and Lin did some stretches, and his entire body felt extremely comfortable. His divine body meridians, sea of vital energy and consciousness had all been significantly enhanced. Not only that, but he had also borrowed the power of the demonic blood Kirin to cultivate the second stage of the evergreen technique. His life force, poison resistance, and regenerative abilities had all been elevated to a whole new level. Even regrowing severed limbs was a piece of cake for him. Congratulations, Lin. You've successfully broken through to the soul formation final stage. Su Xiaolan's pleasant voice was the first to congratulate him. There was a smile that came from the bottom of her heart on her pretty little face. Her eyebrows and eyes were curved as she smiled sweetly, and Lin couldn't help but pinch her cheek with a smile. I've made you worry, but I'm invincible now. Su Xiaolan turned to Lin with a reproachful expression. At this moment, Ao Nio and the frog also came to their senses, and they immediately began to boast to Lin. Who was the most powerful here? It wasn't the unfathomably powerful demonic blood Kirin. It was the invincible soul formation stage, Cultivator, that even the demonic blood Kirin couldn't do anything to, and Lin. Chapter 818. Mu. Congratulations on your breakthrough, Senior and Lin. I'm willing to follow you into battle. Ao Nio spoke with a fawning expression. Ribbit. Senior and Lin punched the Kirin blood jade with his fist and kicked the demonic blood Kirin with his foot before instantly making his breakthrough. What an astonishing feat! The poison mist frog expressed its admiration for Lin without any hesitation, and Lin couldn't be bothered with the two nobodies around him. He made his way over to the demonic blood Kirin and joined his hands in gratitude. Thank you for helping me break through my cultivation bottleneck, Senior. The middle-aged man almost burst into tears again upon hearing this. What a good way to use the phrase, help with everything. He had even given himself away. Don't call me Senior. The middle-aged man waved his hand unnaturally. Just call me by my name. For some reason, he felt a little uncomfortable being referred to as Senior by Lin. Ever since his Kirin blood jade transformed into Lin's clothes, he couldn't even muster up the thought of hurting Lin. It was as if he really had become Lin's woman. The middle-aged man's eyes suddenly widened, and his expression twisted as he drew a sharp intake of breath. Woman, my A** guess. I am a male Kirin. Seeing the middle-aged man's expression suddenly crumble, and Lin and Su Xiaolan immediately pulled out their weapons in fear that the middle-aged man would suddenly attack them. Senior, are you all right? And Lin asked, I told you not to call me Senior. The veins on the middle-aged man's forehead bulged. Call me by my name. Then what's your name? And Lin asked. The middle-aged man calmed himself down before replying in an indifferent voice, My surname is Dongfang. Dongfang? So it was a human name. Those with the surname Dongfang were all very high and mighty. And Lin nodded. What's Dongfang? The middle-aged man looked up with a smug expression. My name is Dongfang Zhuangshi. Everyone instantly fell silent. Ao Nio's eyes widened, and the groundhog silently picked at its ears. Zhuangshi? And Lin was wondering if he had heard wrong. That's right. That's a pretty good name, right? She was the one who gave it to me. The uncle smiled tenderly. She said that being strong and sturdy represented a kind of vitality of life. The name Zhuangshi contains the simplest and most genuine emotions. It is compatible with the path of life, and it is easy to understand and catchy. And Lin's mouth twitched. Su Xiaolan tried hard not to laugh as her face turned red. What King compatibility with the Tao of life? Uncle must have been tricked by her, right? 2F King down to earth. 2F King simple. Dongfang Zhuangshi? This was a clear stream of Dongfang's surname. Puchi. Aha. Croak. The frog couldn't help but burst into laughter. Dongfang Zhuangshi focused his gaze, and killing intent instantly erupted from his body as he glared at the frog with crimson eyes. What are you laughing at? Jie. The frog stopped laughing. Its strong desire to live made it think quickly. Senior Dongfang, I'm not laughing at you. I suddenly thought of a joke. That's why I suddenly laughed. Ha, joke? What joke? Tell me, Dongfang Zhuangshi said coldly. The frog took a deep breath. Once upon a time, there were two monsters. They felt bored, so they decided to experience the human world. One of them became a handsome man, while the other became a beautiful woman. They coincidentally met, fell in love, and got married. In order to not give themselves away, they even aged themselves every day. 100 years later, both of them have lost their cool. So why is this old thing still not dead? Ha ha ha. Isn't it funny? Croak. Ha ha ha. The frog guffawed as it prayed in its heart. Laugh. All of you laugh. Dongfang Zhuangshi turned expressionlessly toward Lin and the others. Is this joke funny? And Lin immediately laughed along with him. It's quite funny. However, he added in his heart, not as funny as your name. Dongfang Zhuangshi, Dongfang Zhuangshi harumphed coldly. Perhaps he felt like these people really had a low threshold for humor, so he changed the subject and turned to Lin. Now let's settle the score. You stole my Kirin blood jade. And Lin and Su Xiaolan's expressions became grave upon hearing this. Were they finally going to settle the score? Hey, there's no need to act like this. Dongfang Zhuangshi was a little sad and dejected upon seeing Lin's expression, and he hurriedly tried to dissuade him. It's like this. I'm a cultured man, so I'm going to be reasonable. Dongfang Zhuangshi spoke with a warm smile, and Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. Reasonable. Could this matter be reasoned with? He felt like he was in the wrong here. If Dongfang Zhuangshi were to attack him, then he would feel less guilty. Dongfang Zhuangshi was trying to reason with him, but he was feeling a little uncomfortable instead. All right, Uncle Dongfang, how do you want me to reason with you? And Lin decided to see what Dongfang Zhuangshi had to say first. If they couldn't come to an agreement, then they could just fight. Oh, right, it seemed like Dongfang Zhuangshi couldn't attack him. This was probably why Dongfang Zhuangshi was trying to reason with him. Since he couldn't attack, he could only use words. And Lin, I'm not going to lie to you. I've discovered that I can't leave you anymore. Dongfang Zhuangshi spoke with a serious expression. And Lin, Su Xiaolan's eyelids twitched. Uncle Dongfang, Please finish your sentence in case there are any unnecessary misunderstandings. And Lin's expression darkened. Dongfang Zhuangshi nodded. It's like this. The Kirin blood jade is formed from the essence of my life. It contains everything aside from my consciousness, so it could be said to be my body. Standing before you now is the demonic blood Kirin with its consciousness as its main body. It is like a rootless flame that needs to be nourished by my body. Otherwise, it will be snuffed out. The middle-aged man made his way toward Lin as he spoke and laid his hands on his shoulders with a scorching light in his eyes. Hence, Lin, I can't leave you, so let me stay by your side. You stole my Kirin blood jade, so you have to take responsibility, right? And Lin's chest constricted. Take responsibility? What **King responsibility? Do you think you're a celestial maiden? It's disgusting to have a grown man following you around all the time. Su Xiaolan massaged her brows with a distressed expression. Why did things have to develop to this point? This middle-aged man's words were clearly very strange, but they made a lot of sense. If they didn't agree, wouldn't they be treated as villains? Are you going to follow me all the time? And Lin felt a headache coming on. Dongfang Zhuangshi nodded. I know what you're worried about. Don't worry, I only need to absorb your energy every once in a while. I won't follow you all the time. During this process, I will do my best to recover my strength and reconstruct my mythological beast body. The day I attain the phenomenal success stage of my mythological beast body will be the day I become an independent existence and can leave you. And Lin heaved a faint sigh. He felt like there was no other way, so he could only nod in agreement. Just like that, a strange middle-aged man with an indescribable appearance joined in Lin's team. Chapter 819. Not only did Lin obtain the Kirin blood jade, but he also obtained the resurrected demonic blood Kirin, Dongfang Zhuangshi, into their team. And Lin couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He and Dongfang Zhuangshi had already established some sort of master-slave relationship. So Dongfang Zhuangshi's pets, Gluttony and the Groundhog, were pretty much Lin's pets, right? After that, the team began to form a harmonious relationship. He's supposed to be the final boss, so how did he become an existence that I can't live without? And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. Now that the conflict had been resolved, it was time to resolve the issue of Dongfang Zhuangshi's escape. Dongfang Zhuangshi had been sealed here by Pangu as a punishment for his previous crimes. This type of suppression was far more terrifying than death. Wasn't the demonic blood Kirin supposed to have extremely powerful life force? Then he would use 10,000 different types of torture methods, one at a time, before combining them again. He experienced extremely terrifying torture and refinement before being tortured to death and transformed into the Kirin blood jade. It would be far too naive to think that this was the end. His consciousness was still unable to break free from the Kirin blood jade. Instead, it had been separated from his consciousness and was unable to enter the cycle of reincarnation. This was simply too tragic. He couldn't die even if he wanted to. However, this situation was an opportunity for him to be reborn. 50 Great Tao, 49 Heavenly Evolution. These gloomy days were transformed by Lin's arrival. Everyone sighed with emotion upon hearing Dongfang Zhuangshi's story, and Lin asked Dongfang Zhuangshi why he had been sealed away by Pangu. No one would punish a Tao integration stage mythological beast for an ordinary crime. The truth behind this was definitely very terrifying. Dongfang Zhuangshi didn't hide the truth. He had slaughtered an entire continent and used all of the living beings on the continent as blood sacrifices, thereby enraging Pangu. The hair on Lin's back stood on end upon hearing this. He looked at the middle-aged man before him with a gentle expression and found it hard to imagine that he would do something like this. Why did you do that? There had to be a reason for doing something. He was very curious as to why the middle-aged man would do something like this. Dongfang Zhuangshi shook his head upon hearing this. It's all in the past now, so what's the point of talking about it? Trying to keep me guessing? Don't you know I have OCD? Dongfang Zhuangshi, I order you to tell me the truth. And Lin said solemnly. Dongfang Zhuangshi shuddered, and even though he was very reluctant, he still spoke with difficulty. The living being that ruled over that continent sent an army to destroy the town of the woman I love. Even she died in that sudden disaster, so they all deserve to die. And Lin and Su Xiaolan were startled and didn't know what to say. Because the person he loved had died, he wanted to take revenge on the entire continent. This was crazy, and Lin couldn't bring himself to criticize this uncle. He couldn't say things like being benevolent and righteous, respecting life and not being so deranged. Because if Su Xiaolan was killed by someone, he might do something even crazier. Yep, he was starting to think from another perspective again. This was a good habit. He could empathize with the feelings of the antagonist, and Lin felt that he was really a reasonable Enritian. What was most surprising was that he really didn't think that he would be able to force the uncle to tell him the truth by issuing an order. It looked like his words were quite effective. Would he be able to order the uncle to do some strange things in the future as well? The previous topic was a little heavy, so Lin and the others quickly turned their attention to something else, which was to open up the passageway between the vast land of blood and the outside world, so that Dongfang Zhuangshi could return to this world. Dongfang Zhuangshi led everyone down the massive mushroom building and into the center of the floating continent. The passageway between the two worlds is up ahead. Dongfang Zhuangshi pointed at a massive blue gate over a kilometer away. A frosty aura emanated from the gate, which seemed to be able to freeze space itself. What should we do? And Lin asked. Dongfang Zhuangshi pointed at the blue gate in the distance, as he replied, This passageway has been carved by Pangu, which is extremely powerful against beings like me. However, it's very ineffective against soul formation stage cultivators like you. And Lin's lips twitched as he pointed at a bunch of soul formation stage beasts who had been frozen to death within the Gate of Light. Is this what you meant by very ineffective against soul formation stage cultivators? A disdainful expression appeared on Dongfang Zhuangshi's face. What kind of trash are those soul formation stage cultivators? They're as useless as that cow and frog you brought with you. In my eyes, only you two look like soul formation stage cultivators. Ao Nio and the divine poison frog almost threw up a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. How the F***CK did they get dragged into this without saying anything? Did this Kirin have some kind of misunderstanding about soul formation stage cultivators? Beasts like them were the normal soul formation stage cultivators. Those two humans were supremely talented, but they were different. However, even though they grumbled internally, they could only put on smiles on their faces as if to say, "You're right, Kirin." And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. I'm just an ordinary soul formation stage cultivator, so I won't be able to complete this mission if it's too difficult. Tell us the details first. Ao Nio, the divine poison frog, and the groundhog were F***king kneeling again. And Xiaolin, an ordinary soul formation stage cultivator. All right, Dongfang Zhuangshi nodded. Pangu's glacial carvings become more powerful the further in you go. You can use fire spell techniques to defend against the power of frost. About a kilometer into the blue gate of light, there's an energy core. You just have to help me destroy that core. By the way, those weaklings were frozen after walking for 600 meters. Sigh, they're really too weak. They're all soul beasts at the soul formation pinnacle stage. They're getting worse with each generation. The middle-aged man shook his head and sighed with emotion. The frog Ao Nio and the groundhog all shuddered as they heaved a sigh of relief that they hadn't been chosen. This kind of heavy responsibility should be left to hacks. Aside from the power of frost, are there any other dangers? And Lin asked again. No, that power wasn't targeted at you in the first place. It was targeted at me. I can only say that those beasts were too weak and couldn't even withstand the slightest bit of the power that escaped. Dongfang Zhuangshi raised his head with a hint of pride on his face, as if to say that everyone present was trash. And Lin rolled his eyes. You're so proud of being sealed by a powerful spell technique? If you keep King cocky, I'm going to get out of here and let you keep showing off. Ah, Mr. Lin, please don't be like that. Dongfang Zhuangshi hurriedly offered an apologetic smile. I was wrong just then. I apologize. Gluttony stared at the middle-aged man with an astonished expression. The demonic blood Kirin had always looked down on everyone like ants. When had he ever put on such a weak front? This was probably a fake Kirin. Chapter 8:20. Dongfang Zhuangshi didn't want this to happen either. However, if Enlin really left him behind and left this world, then his instincts told him that he couldn't hurt Enlin. In that case, he would have no choice but to stay here and continue to be an idiot. And Lin finally felt a little better after seeing the once domineering middle-aged man give in. He patted the middle-aged man on the shoulder. Don't worry, this measly Panga's frost energy can't do anything to me. Let's see how I open up a path to the heavens for you. Gasp! Dongfang Zhuangshi instinctively drew a sharp intake of breath. For some reason, he felt like Enlin's figure had become even more imposing. This was clearly a very mundane thing to do. So why did it sound so impactful coming from Enlin's mouth? The younger generation will surpass the older generation. Then I'll leave it to you, Mr. Enlin. Dongfang Zhuangshi bowed respectfully toward Enlin. Enlin waved his hand and began to walk toward the blue gate of light. Su Xiaolan caught up to him with light footsteps. Xiaolan, don't go. I can take care of something like this by myself. And Lin immediately tried to dissuade her. Can't I go and have some fun with something as trivial as this? Su Xiaolan raised her eyebrows. Besides, I'm more adept at playing with fire than you are. Don't even think about leaving me behind this time. And Lin looked into the woman's clear and determined eyes and heaved a faint sigh. All right, then let's be careful. Both of them knew that this was just an empty threat. They were facing the power left behind by Pangu. Even if that power wasn't targeted at them, there were still many variables. Oh, right, and Lin, try to control that golden baby as much as possible. Don't let it unleash my power. Otherwise, I'm afraid that Panga's power will be targeted differently, Dongfang Zhuangshi suddenly added. And Lin rolled his eyes. Unleash the power of the demonic blood Kirin? That was probably overestimating in Kirin. That baby was currently resting in his sea of vital energy in preparation for a battle to the death with the flaming vermilion bird. In his current state, he didn't have the time to run around outside of his body. The two of them started walking towards the blue door. Behind the door was a tunnel shrouded in an extremely cold aura. Inside the tunnel, many powerful beasts had been turned into ice sculptures, their faces still showing the fear they had before they died. As soon as he stepped through the door, a terrifying cold energy began to assault him, and Lin felt an indescribably strong power from the cold energy, as if it could split the entire world in half. Fortunately, the power ignored them, and Lin released his divine flames, and Su Xiaolan also released her holy flames as they advanced. They walked very quickly and soon broke the record of 600 meters set by the beast race's experts. Dongfang Zhuangshi clenched his fists upon seeing this. As expected, Enlin and Su Xiaolan didn't disappoint me. They are the true soul formation stage cultivators, the true heaven's chosen ones. Ao Niao, the divine poison frog, and the neglected groundhog on a blue road. The further they went, the more terrifying the cold became. 700 meters, 800 meters, before Enlin knew it, he had already unleashed the power of his 4 divine flames. Even so, the terrifying cold was still eating away at his power, making him feel a bone-chilling chill. He was feeling a little cold, and he brought out his high-rank immortal tool, the divine flame bead, to enhance the power of his flames. The cold was still assaulting him in a frenzy, and the power of ice had already far exceeded that of the soul formation stage. This was a power comparable to that of a return to void stage mighty figure. 900 meters, and Lin looked up at the white light in the distance, and his body trembled slightly from the cold. Right at this moment, a burst of pure yang energy suddenly flowed into his body, giving him an indescribable sense of warmth. This is... And Lin turned to his side with astonishment on his face to find the woman in the jade dress wearing her usual warm smile. The holy flames surged and fused perfectly with the divine flames. Their flames intertwined with one another, and not only did the temperature skyrocket, but even the intent, realm, and purity of their flames also increased explosively. Boom! Terrifying temperatures erupted, and the power of ice in the surrounding area began to surge back. The white holy flames fused with the 4 divine flames, creating a vibrant rainbow of colors that was extremely dazzling to behold. And Lin had the feeling that every time he felt cold, Xiaolan would appear before him and give him the most beautiful warmth in this world. He was no longer fearful of the cold, and his footsteps began to pick up as he approached the energy core. In the end, Lin and Su Xiaolan arrived directly below the energy core. The energy core hovered 100 meters in the air, and it was a floating blue sigil that was exuding boundless power of ice and frost. Even the space around it has been sealed. Looks like normal flames won't be able to attack it. And Lin raised his head and narrowed his eyes. They stood directly below the seal, and it was as if the clouds had parted to see the mist. They could clearly see the seal in the sky, and they could also feel its terrifying power. The power left behind by Pengu wasn't targeting them, but that didn't mean that the energy core would be easy to break. The demonic blood Kirin had said that the energy core was very easy to break as long as they reached the area directly below the energy core and attacked upward. That area was where the power of the energy core was the weakest. However, the demonic blood Kirin was only saying that it was easy to break through from his perspective. He didn't even consider the situation for soul formation stage cultivators like them. Just the spatial seal alone was enough to make all soul formation stage cultivators dumbstruck. Whoosh! A red streak of light soared into the sky. This was the only technique that Lin could think of that would allow him to break through the spatial seal, the realm-piercing nail. The red streak of light pierced through the spatial seal, but the boundless blue aura swept toward it in a frenzy, and the resistance grew stronger and stronger until it finally stopped right in front of the sigil. No, even though I've broken through the spatial seal, the power of ice and frost is too terrifying. And Lin's brows furrowed tightly. The extremely terrifying power of ice and frost was still crashing relentlessly toward Lin and Su Xiaolan. Under these circumstances, they had to expend a lot of energy to defend themselves against the power of ice, and if they didn't think of a way to break out of this predicament, they would be doomed to failure. A pleasant voice suddenly sounded. What if there was a power that could shatter space at the same time that was imbued with extremely high temperatures? Wouldn't that work? And Lin instantly came to his senses upon hearing this. At this moment, a warm, soft, and slender hand had already latched onto his hand, and a certain connection began to appear. It was as if they were telepathically connected, and the power of the mutant blood phoenix surged forth without much need for words. The 2 halves of the phoenix insignia appeared in the air before fusing together to reach the perfected stage. Red flames erupted, and it was as if a red sun had exploded in the air, crashing into the surrounding space and dispelling the power of ice and frost around them in an extremely violent manner. Crack! The sound of space crumbling erupted. Endless flames rose from the sky and broke through the confinement of the cold force space. The destructive force was like a nuclear explosion, blasting away the cold force and swallowing the blue seal. Chapter 821. The 2 of them had activated the power of the mutant blood phoenix, and the power unleashed by them was absolutely earth-shattering. Aside from Ao Nio, who was somewhat mentally prepared, the divine poison frog, the groundhog, and Gluttony were all stunned by the sudden explosion. Dongfang Zhuangshi was even more excited as he rubbed his hands together and heaved a long sigh. Nice. This is what true power looks like. I was right about you. But why does this power feel so familiar? Terrifying crimson flames engulfed the entire blue passageway. Without the power of Pangu, the power of frost was completely unable to keep the destructive power of the flames at bay. A crisp cracking sound erupted. Energy flowed into the core, and the Pangu seal began to crumble. The power of extreme frost had lost its core, and it began to slowly die down. The flames were still wreaking havoc. A pair of eyes that seemed to contain the starry sky suddenly appeared where the seal had been shattered, and the crimson flames instantly dissipated with a single glare. And Lin and Su Xiaolan's bodies tensed up upon seeing this. They were extremely familiar with that pair of eyes, as they were the same eyes that had appeared when the heavenly judgment phenomenon had appeared. From what Dongfang Zhuangshi had told them, regardless of whether it was the suppression of the stars, the heavenly judgment, or the reversal, they were all powers of laws left behind by Pangu. It would not be an exaggeration to say that those eyes were Pangu's eyes. The two of them were struck by boundless pressure just by standing there, as if they were facing the entire heaven and earth, and their own powers were minuscule and minuscule. The pair of eyes turned toward Lin and Su Xiaolan, and in that instant, Lin's heart seemed to have stopped as fear spread through his entire body. However, the pair of eyes only lingered on Lin for a few seconds before disappearing. The pressure around them was suddenly lifted, and Lin and Su Xiaolan both heaved a heavy sigh of relief. They only came to their senses now, and their palms were covered in sweat as they held each other's hands. This is great. Pangu's seal has finally disappeared. I'm free. The middle-aged man outside the door said excitedly, and the Qilin horn on his head also released a cheerful light. He led Gluttony and the beasts to Lin, and Su Xiaolan with an excited expression. Thank you so much. If it weren't for your arrival, I, Dongfang Zhuangshi, would probably still be subjected to endless torture in this mystic realm. I've already said that if you follow me, I can grant you a path to the heavens. And Lin patted his sleeves and casually said, Dongfang Zhuangshi's evaluation of the cultivator before him improved once again. Admittedly, this cultivator's cultivation base wasn't all that high in his eyes. However, his aptitude, his Tao heart, and his demeanor, he was definitely going to become a mighty figure in the future. He faced the door and formed a seal with his hands. Blood-colored energy waves spread outward, boundless and boundless, even causing the heavens and earth to resonate. What are you doing? And Lin asked curiously. Master is going to put away the vast land of blood, the Taotai said. His voice had only just fallen when the floating continent outside began to twist and contract, as if it had been sucked into a peculiar space. It shrank further and further until it completely disappeared. And Lin looked at Dongfang Zhuangshi, upon which he opened his mouth to reveal a crimson bead. He could sense an extremely powerful spatial power emanating from the bead. It could be said that a Qilin holding a bead was taking an entire floating continent with it. Outside the blue gate of light was an empty void. On one end was the starry sky, and on the other was the inky black earth. There were no red stars in this mystic realm. It looks like all of the beast tribe powerful beings in this mystic realm are going to get lost. And Lin sighed with emotion. Without the guidance of the crimson star, just the yellow star alone wasn't enough to determine the location of the exit. After all, the exit wasn't on the yellow star. 3 points to determine the location, 2 points to determine the path, and 1 point to determine the location of the exit. And Lin wasn't a saint, so he couldn't care less about the fate of these beasts. Under Dongfang Zhuangshi's guidance, they continued onward within the territory of the infernal divine Bat Emperor. At the center of a massive crater, there was a flashing gate of light above the crimson vortex. This was the exit of the mystic realm, a humanoid creature enshrouded in viscous black, Mist stood not far away from the exit. 3 returned to Void Stage immortal beasts stood beside it, waiting for the beast tribe powerful beings to return from the mystic realm. The Jade Bone immortal bug was also among them, and its sapphire eyes were fixed on the exit. It knew that when Lin and Su Xiaolin appeared, it would be the time for them to escape. The Divine Bat Emperor's trusted aide, the return to Void final stage Nightmare Mudman, was here. Their next mission was going to be extremely dangerous, so they couldn't afford to be careless. Another streak of light flashed past, and a black mammoth with wounds all over its body appeared. The Nightmare Mudman waved a hand through the air, and the viscous black mist materialized into 5 black humanoid monsters, which began to inspect the mammoth's body as well as its spatial tools. Humph! Useless trash. The Nightmare Mudman was in a very bad mood. It was clear that this mammoth had also come up empty-handed. The first few batches of beasts could occasionally obtain some mystic realm treasures, which could provide them with some information about the vast land of blood. However, the recent batches of beasts had a high survival rate, but the amount of valuable information they had obtained was extremely limited. I wonder how the Divine Guardian Squad is progressing. The Crimson Star is the biggest mystery, so we can only pin our hopes on them now. The Nightmare Mudman shook its head and sighed. The Divine Guardian Squad, led by the peerless Saber Demon, was quite reliable. None of the Divine Guardian Squad members had come out yet. Perhaps they were still fighting to obtain the Kirin Blood Jade? Many thoughts flashed through the Nightmare Mudman's mind. At this moment, a sudden turn of events occurred. The blood corruption emanating from within the massive crimson vortex began to slowly diminish, and even the power emanating from it also diminished significantly. What's going on? The Nightmare Mudman stared at the scenes unfolding before its eyes with incredulity, and a sense of foreboding welled up in its heart. Could it be that the passageway to this mystic realm is about to close? No, it had to contact the Divine Bat Emperor. This turn of events was far too sudden for it to handle. The Nightmare Mudman was just about to contact the Divine Bat Emperor when the gate of light nearby changed again. Whoosh spatial fluctuations erupted again. The Nightmare Mudman turned its gaze toward the gate of light, upon which it saw a figure standing at the front of the group. Its golden fur was shimmering, and it held a pair of snowy white sabers in its hands. The Nightmare Mudman was ecstatic to find that it was the captain of the Divine Guardian Squad, the peerless Saber Demon. That's great, he's back. Such a reliable groundhog. It would be fine if it didn't come back, but now that it did, it definitely came back with a harvest. Beside, it was the Divine Poison Frog, which was also a member of the Divine Guardian Squad. The Nightmare Mudman was very pleased. The Divine Poison Frog was one of the more active members of the Divine Guardian Squad. It performed very well, and it appeared to be quite loyal and reliable. Even though its parents had passed away and it no longer had a home, it was always thinking about going home. This was most likely a sentimental frog. For some reason, the Nightmare Mudman's impression of the Divine Poison Frog was becoming better and better. Perhaps it was because of their triumphant return. The Nightmare Mudman was just about to personally welcome them when it discovered that there were few figures behind them. They didn't appear to be members of the Divine Guardian Squad. There was a white cow with long fur, and there was a monster with the body of a goat and the face of a human. Why were they so familiar? Soon, the Nightmare Mudman's expression stiffened. It saw 3 humans. No, there was a humanoid being with a crimson Kirin horn on its head. The Nightmare Mudman couldn't help but draw a sharp intake of breath. Who was that person? Chapter 8:22. The Nightmare Mudman felt like things weren't as simple as they seemed. It was actually unable to see through the Kirin-horned male's cultivation base. One had to realize that it was a return to Void Final Stage Immortal Beast. To be able to hide from the concentrated probing of its divine sense, one either had a special concealment artifact or had a higher realm than it. Could it be a being from the vast land of blood? Are they friend or foe? The Nightmare Mudman was a little unsure of these strange creatures that had suddenly appeared. If it weren't for the fact that the golden groundhog and the divine poison frog were also there, he would have been in a completely different situation. Peerless saber demon, divine poison frog, what's going on with those other living beings? The Nightmare Mudman didn't immediately approach them. Instead, it stood on the spot with a cautious expression and tried to understand the situation. The Jade Bone Immortal Bug was also a little perplexed at the sight of these people. Why had there been only 2 people when they had entered? And then this was the group that had emerged. Not only did Enlin and Su Xiaolan mix with the Divine Guardian Squad, but there was also a strange human and a strange beast with them. Wait, why does that strange beast look so familiar? The Jade Bone Immortal Bug's body shuddered as it came to a sudden realization. Wasn't this one of the 4F** King ferocious beasts, Gluttony? Neither the divine poison frog nor the peerless saber demon answered the Nightmare Mudman's question. The peerless saber demon had already established a beast pet contract with Dongfang Zhuangshi, so it couldn't betray its master. Meanwhile, the divine poison frog didn't dare to speak out of turn. If it said anything wrong, it would be slapped to death by the demonic blood Kirin before the Nightmare Mudman could even react. You're not going to say anything. The Nightmare Mudman finally couldn't take it anymore. A terrifying might erupted from his body, and the power of the Nightmare Divine Tao soared into the sky, making the entire sky howl with sinister winds. A myriad of illusory images appeared and blotted out the sky, and they corroded the world to the point it seemed like the end of the world had arrived. This is the Nightmare Mudman's power of the Divine Tao? There's still quite a gap between them and the others, a man with delicate features said lightly. This man who was asking for a beating the moment he opened his mouth was none other than Enlin, who had caused the others to die in the tribulation transcendence. Sure enough, the Nightmare Mudman instantly exploded upon hearing this. It glared at Enlin. A mere soul formation stage, Cultivator dares to boast here? You're courting death. He gripped the air in front of him, and the black power of the divine Tao intertwined like silk threads before transforming into a sharp black spear. Rumble. The terrifying might instantly cause the surrounding void to shatter. This was not only a physical attack, but also a spiritual attack. No matter how strong the enemy's vitality was, they would fall into eternal nightmares and be tortured to death by the nightmares. Peerless saber demon, divine poison frog, I'll give you one last chance. If you continue to remain silent, I'll treat you as traitors and kill you as well. The Nightmare Mudman was getting serious now. All of the beast tribe powerful beings around it hurriedly retreated in fear of being struck by the shock waves of the attack. Only the 3 returned to Void Stage immortal beasts continued to stand loyally by its side. The divine poison frog was given a fright by the Nightmare Mudman's display, but its anxiety was alleviated slightly when it turned its attention to Dongfang Zhuangshi. The Nightmare Mudman was very powerful, but the demonic blood Kirin was even more terrifying. The Kirin had already explained everything to them when they were traversing through the passageway between the 2 worlds. Even though it had been suppressed and tortured by Pengu for a long time and had lost its essential physical body, just the power of its consciousness was still comparable to a mighty figure at the return to Void Pinnacle Stage. The Nightmare Mudman finally confirmed that something was wrong with the divine poison frog and the peerless saber demon upon seeing this. Die. The Nightmare Mudman waved a hand through the air, and the Nightmare Divine Tao spear pierced through the air toward Enlin and the others with boundless sharpness. The beast tribe was just like that. If they didn't want to talk, then they'd just fight. They'd kill you first, then search your body to see if there was anything good. Dongfang Zhuangshi's brows furrowed slightly as he looked at the oncoming attack. I didn't provoke it, so why is it trying to kill us? Right at this moment, a spatial rift appeared before Enlin and the others, and the black dragon leaped out from it. Ha ha ha! Master's wife, let's go! Xiaoza, who had received the summons, made a dazzling appearance. Boom! The spear imbued with the power of the nightmare divine Tao struck Xiao Zhe's body, upon which an extremely sharp screech erupted. Howl! Xiao Zhe let loose a wail of anguish, and he felt as if his consciousness had been torn apart. His body was propelled toward Enlin and the others by the impact of the spear. Dongfang Zhuangshi instinctively swatted the spear aside. Boom! Monstrous crimson power erupted forth. The black dragon, over 10,000 feet in length, was swatted aside like a kite with a broken string. Little Xiao, are you all right? And Lin was given a fright upon seeing this. Everything had happened too quickly, and he had no time to react. Xiao Zhe was completely dumbstruck. As soon as he leaped out of the spatial rift, he was struck in the waist by a terrifying spear. Then he was sent flying by a terrifyingly powerful slap, and he almost fainted on the spot. In that instant, he thought he had been ambushed. However, he soon discovered that Enlin was greeting him as if nothing had happened. Only then did he realize that he had been accidentally wounded by an ally and an enemy. I'm fine. Master, let's get out of here. Xiao Zhe twisted his injured waist before flying toward Enlin. This is a dragon at the pinnacle of the return to void intermediate stage? What powerful defensive prowess! The nightmare mudman's expression faltered slightly before turning to Dongfang Zhuangshi with a bewildered expression. It gripped the air before it. Boom! The space within a radius of 5 kilometers was sealed. But the most pleasant surprise is that I discovered an extremely powerful being. The nightmare mudman looked at Dongfang Zhuangshi with excitement, and the viscous black substance all over its body began to boil. That power, there's no mistaking it. Even though it's hard to believe, it's definitely the power of the demonic blood Kirin. My luck is simply too good. I didn't even have to look for it. A faint smile appeared on Dongfang Zhuangshi's face as he looked at the excited nightmare mudman. So what made you think that you were lucky to have encountered me? The nightmare mudman faltered upon hearing this. So be it. Dongfang Zhuangshi cracked his neck from side to side. I'm a reasonable person. I didn't provoke you, yet you tried to kill me, so I naturally had to retaliate. A crimson energy slowly dissipated from the middle-aged man's Taoist robe. Dongfang Zhuangshi tore at the spatial seal unleashed by the nightmare mudman with his hands. Crap! The nightmare mudman's expression shifted drastically, and it clapped its hands together. The countless dream projections in the sky crashed down toward the middle-aged man like a raging sea. The dense dream projections descended with boundless might. Fear, despair, and other negative emotions engulfed heaven and earth, corroding all living beings. Some of the beast tribe powerful beings nearby knelt to the ground in fright, while others fell to their knees as if they had gone insane. Some of the weaker ones even had their consciousness shattered and their vitality severed. An earth-shattering red light soared into the sky, piercing a hole through the boundless sea of black shadows before arriving before the nightmare mudman at an extremely fast speed. The nightmare mudman's eyes widened in shock and horror. Dongfang Zhuangshi remained expressionless, but a crimson vortex over 10 kilometers in radius erupted from his fist as he launched a punch toward the pitch-black, viscous, mighty figure before him. The might of this punch sent shockwaves rippling for several dozen kilometers, and countless dream projections were reduced to dust. The nightmare mudman's power of the divine Tao was shattered, and its body was flattened into a puddle of black water. It spat out a large mouthful of blood, and its body plummeted to the ground like a cannonball. Boom! A massive crater appeared in the ground. Dongfang Zhuangshi slowly withdrew his fist and stood proudly in midair. Deathly silence ensued. Regardless of whether it was Enlin and the others, or the beast tribe powerful beings, everyone stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes with incredulity. The nightmare mudman had been severely wounded, and Dongfang Zhuangshi had only launched a single punch.